So today we're going to be talking about public safety. Kind of, we saved the best for last. Not that all of it isn't really important, it is, but in terms of the numbers, in relation to our general fund, public safety is where we spend the majority of our dollars. Over 77% of the general fund supports public safety services. So it is an important part of the conversation, and I'm going to kick this off to just kind of connect this conversation to all the other conversations we've had, and then once we're finished with the public safety piece, I'm going to kind of close it out to summarize, because this is the last meeting of topics, trying to provide that broad-based foundation for the work that's ahead. After today, we're going to be delving in and trying to come up with solutions, recommendations for the new two-year budget, making recommendations if a revenue measure should be considered for November. I mean, this group basically has recommended that. That is what was suggested to council. But there's some options in relation to that too that still need to be looked at. Anyway, I'm going to get started here. Thank you all for being here again this morning. As I was just saying, this is just day 3 for me out of the boot after breaking my foot, and while it's very wonderful to be out of the boot, I'm still not quite perfect on my feet. So just ignore that if I look like unless I fall over, then please help me. Okay, so just kind of a reminder, and we've talked about this comes up in council meetings and in almost everything that we do in Morgan Hill. We mention the fact that public safety has been the top priority in Morgan Hill for many, many, many years. It's the council's top priority. We hear from the community all the time that public safety is a top priority, and truthfully that's not unusual. For most communities, public safety is a top priority. It's one of those essential things. We want to be safe before we talk about some of the other issues, right? As I just mentioned, 77% of our general fund goes to supporting public safety. Both the fire and the police have done many creative things. Our partnership with CAL FIRE was a very creative step and cost-saving step when we took it to continue to provide a high level of public safety here in Morgan Hill, but in a different way, a partnership manner where we are not actually the providers of the service, but partnering with an organization that we believe can provide good service for a reasonable cost. We do a lot of different things in terms of participating regionally, and that's really important, both for us as the South County and also to be a part of the broader county. We do have some special circumstances here in South County that kind of are unique to us, as we're a little bit separate from the rest of the county, and our police and fire both do a good job of being involved on regional issues. We have community partnerships. We have a very active community police academy, and we have our wonderful volunteers in policing, which spread the resource of police services or create more breadth. And the chiefs will talk in more detail about all these things as we go on. So you've seen this slide now numerous times. This is our general fund revenues, and just a reminder that the majority of our revenues today come from property tax. The next, sales tax. And just want to call out our hotel tax area, which isn't huge on this graph, because we've got 2 hotels that have been referended, and we were anticipating about $800,000 in revenue. So the number of hotels, if they were allowed and approved here in Morgan Hill, would expand that hotel tax to be a more significant portion of the general fund. Here's just the breakdown of the general fund expenditures in relation to public safety. About 55% of it goes to our police services, and there's a list of the various services that are part of police. Chief Swing will be going into that in more detail. This just kind of breaks it out for you and shows you that there is a small amount of revenue that does come into the police department, Chief Swing again can go into more detail on that. But so that 55% of the general fund is net of the revenue that we bring in for police. Fire is a smaller percentage of the general fund, about 22%. And again, there are some small revenues that come in relation to our fire services. And so the 22% represents a net of the expense minus the income. We talked about in every single presentation, I believe, about how we're being strategic. Through partnerships, through grants. You can see here that both police and fire have recently had some very significant grants. And I know, I think it's Rick Kent who has brought up, and maybe others of you, that the city should be looking even more at grants. And I will just remind you that the city of Morgan Hill, with very limited resources, has increased the number of grants that we have both applied for and been successful in getting. We don't have a grant writer, and so we pulled together staff to look very closely at the requirements of grants, see if there's creative ways we can meet those requirements, and then we move forward. And honestly, for a small city, we really have been very, very successful in obtaining grants that, again, you know, spread our dollars, allow us to do things that we wouldn't be able to do without those grant funds. A reminder again of our unfunded needs. This again is a slide you've seen numerous times. But up at the top, it's about 1.3 million for what is the anticipated and current need for police, and 2.3 for fire. So those are things that are currently unfunded, that we know we need, but we don't have a funding source for, at least in the current environment. Also remember that due to recent legislation, there's an additional, about, we're estimating 1.1 million in funding that in our first conversation, we didn't have a number for yet, that now we have projected. So it increases that 7 million to a higher number, and potentially more, because we're not sure what the impacts are completely yet of SB 330. Here's the graph that you've seen. The projections for the general fund, and remember again, we have not budgeted in those police and fire needs. If we do, you see how much more quickly the graph tumbles down. And remember that the policy of the council is to maintain a fund balance of 25% of revenues. And you see how quickly we start to drop below that. Okay, that's my quick overview and summary. I'd like to introduce to you Chief David Swing, our police chief. I think he's probably a familiar face to most of you. And he's the one who's going to go into the detail about fire. And then we have our police. And then I was looking back at Jim. Then we have our Assistant Fire Chief, Jim Crawford, who may not be as familiar of a face to you, but he'll be going into the detail on fire. I think both of them are happy to take questions as they go along. We've also kind of divided their presentations and are allowing for questions at the end as well. Chief Swing.
I think it'd be great if the chief described fire and his
Though I could describe fire, I would never do it the justice that Chief Crawford could, with his experience and expertise. Thanks, Sergio. Appreciate that. So we're going to talk about police. You good, Sergio? Thank you. So we're going to talk about police and kind of history. We're going to have questions along the way. I'm going to use these boards as well. Something that Maureen just touched on was that we are 55% of the general fund budget. Keep that number in mind as we have our conversation, because that's going to be especially important and relevant as it relates to, in part, why public safety is a large part of the general fund discretionary resources. As you can see there, a little bit of history. I started with the organization in 1995. in October as a reserve police officer. I did 2 years as a reserve officer, was hired full-time, put through the academy, and now have been here ever since. I came on the heels of 1992 when, for those who were here, who was in Morgan Hill in 1992? Okay, a few. So those of you who were here in 92 recall that the utility users tax was repealed, and it resulted in a loss of revenue for the city and resulted in layoffs of about 13 police officers. One of those officers is Dave Knopf, who's an assistant chief in San Jose. One retired as a captain in Gilroy and a captain in Santa Clara. So a lot of the kind of up-and-comers, if you would, in our organization were laid off at that time in 92. We had 26,000 people in Morgan Hill in 1992, and I've heard between 34 and 37 officers in our department. Our budget is about $17.6 million, as Maureen mentioned. We're going to talk about the divisions there. Going back to this number here, what does this number represent? Well, it represents the number of hours in a year. 24 times 365 is 8,760. And in public safety, when we have a vacancy, someone's on vacation or a training or what have you, it generally results in having to backfill someone because we just can't have that vacant position as a deficiency in our staffing for our community. We do have a little bit of extra, not extra, but additional folks in patrol that can help backfill some of that. However, it generally does require backfilling a position. So 8,760. And there, how many hours in a year for an average employee? 2,080. I think we all understand that. So one position to cover 24/7 requires 4 different FTEs in public safety. So this is a part of the why we're 55% of the general fund. So we're going to talk about all these different things in our time together. Just by way of background, we have 42 sworn positions. Although one of those is filled right now, we have some folks in the academy. We're going to have 1 animal services officer, 3 MSOs. Our multi-service officers, or MSOs as we call them, are a true force multiplier for our patrol division. Our MSOs handle bookings and cold reports like burglaries and auto burglaries and thefts and stolen vehicles. They help out with towing the vehicles and primarily prisoner management. Why is prisoner management important? Prisoners or people in custody present not only a liability risk if something were to happen to them, but to book someone up at San Jose takes about 2 to 2.5 hours of an officer's time. From the time they enter our facility until the time the person comes back from San Jose. And so having an MSO or a multi-service officer on staff allows our officers to remain available to serve higher priority calls throughout the community at a cost benefit to the city. We have 9 dispatchers that can cover our public safety answering services in the communication center, some record specialists, 4.5 record specialists, 2 cadets, and a canine officer, Bosco, who is much adored in our community. If you haven't seen Instagram, if you're on Instagram, follow him on Instagram. You'll have some great posts to look at as well. I think that dog has more ties than I do. Yes, Doug.
You have almost all the positions filled. What number of officers are on limited duty due to injury on average throughout a year?
It's difficult to say on average throughout the year. For example, we had one that just came back from light duty after tearing his Achilles off duty. So he was out for a period of time. We have one officer who's out today on an injury, and we'll see how that progresses. We had an officer who had to medically retire recently because of a job-related injury. The work of public safety is physically demanding. I know that, so if we have one officer out today, that's maybe 3% or so of our force, maybe 4%, but at any rate, other agencies, I know they have up to 10% of their department out on injury at any given time. So it just varies. And we have had 10 or more percent at other times. So anyways, that's just a background of kind of who we are as an organization and of our team. We're going to look at each of these different divisions. We have, as you can see there, 5 divisions. Dispatch and support, typically 2 different divisions combined into one, but administration, field operations, special operations, support services and dispatch, as well as Office of Emergency Services. Where we're a little bit unique is in the world of OES, Office of Emergency Services. Cities that have a police department and a fire department that are a part of the overall city framework, unlike Morgan Hill that contracts out with CAL FIRE, OES will typically fall into the fire department and see more as a fire function for other cities that have their own fire department. Cities that either contract out or are part of a fire district will have OES as part of the police department. So that's something a little bit unique for us. So our administration department, so $1.3 million budget. We have 4 people, including myself, an administrative sergeant, an analyst, an executive assistant. And we're responsible for the administrative work in the organization. So hiring, recruiting is in our budget, crime analysis, internal investigation, special projects, things of that nature. I gotta tell you, it's none of the exciting work of law enforcement. Right? It is the administrative side. It's not the exciting stuff that officers do out in the field.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Can you tell us what a special project would be?
It could be a grant. Maureen mentioned we don't have a grant writer in the city. We're very fortunate to have an amazing grant writer in the police department as part of her other duties, Margaret Blogso. She is our police analyst. She does crime analysis, budget analysis, grant writing, the e-newsletters that you may receive. She writes most of that material, not all of it. So just special projects that come up along the way. And they kind of vary. If I get a crazy idea, there might be a special project that comes up tomorrow out of this meeting. So. Field operations, again, is a $9.1 million budget. The folks assigned to field operations are the people that you see out on patrol on a regular basis, day in and day out. This is again our 24/7 group that covers safety services and responds to priority calls and other calls throughout the city, as well as does proactive work. Last night, I think we made about 5 arrests as an example. And as I'm thinking off the top of my head, I think 3 out of the 5 were proactive arrests. Drug sales, a DUI, and probably another DUI. So a lot of the work that we do is done proactively by our officers, and having sufficient patrol staffing allows us to do that work and be able to balance our calls for service and also our proactive work by the officers. You can see here, yes.
Does that mean the city is divided into 4 sections with one?
Great question.
Section?
We had 3 sectors, or beats, depending upon which term we use sectors. And so yes, there are 3 sectors, and if there's an extra, if there are more officers working than there are sectors, then we have someone that's able to help out and throughout the city.
Thank you.
Our staffing, a minimum staffing is 3 officers and a supervisor. So in our patrol division, we have a sergeant rank and a corporal rank, and then officers. The corporal can fill in as a beat officer one day and as a supervisor the next. It's kind of a utility type player in our patrol division. But our minimum staffing is 3 officers and a supervisor. That allows us to respond to essentially 2 calls at the same time. So if we have a call like an alarm call, as an example, someone's alarm's going off, we're going to send 2 officers to that call because we don't know if that is a false alarm or a actual burglary in progress. If we have a domestic violence call, depending upon the call, we may send all 4 officers to that call because of the nature and inherent risks around domestic violence. So, but our minimum staffing is 3 officers and a supervisor. So you can see there we responded to about 25,000 radio calls. In addition to that, we had about 12 to 13,000 self-initiated calls for service last year. This is all 2018 data, which resulted in about 1,600 arrests and 3,800 reports. How does that compare to prior years? In 2016, we had about 2,000 arrests. So the arrests can kind of fluctuate depending upon officer availability and self-initiated activity and other factors. So the next division is our Special Operations Division. We have a $2.7 million budget in Special Ops. Special Operations is our investigators, our detectives, our school resource officers, and our traffic officers. The division Also includes the Office of Emergency Services and the coordinator there. That's under the leadership of a Special Operations Captain. By the way, I forgot to mention, with me today is Captain Shane Paulsgrove, who oversees our patrol division. Shane has had his whole career here as well and has been a captain with our agency for about the last seven years. I was in the 6 to 7 range. I would have been there. So Shane oversees field operations. And then Captain Emil Kokish oversees special operations, which includes the areas that you have here. Major case investigation, our task force agents. We participate in 2 different regional task forces, an auto theft task force and a major crimes task force, both based out of San Jose. It does work throughout the county. So between those 2 groups, we have 2 agents assigned to that, 2 officers assigned in those areas. One of those groups, RADF, our auto theft task force, receives partial reimbursement through our participation. So the participation is offset by about 50% from state legislation.
And graffiti abatement.
And graffiti abatement, thank you, you're right. And we have a part-time graffiti abatement officer, and he is assigned to this as well. He's a part-time temporary employee, which is a non-benefited position, but it's a great stepping stone. And looking at our past graffiti officers, one today is a police officer with us after being a graffiti abatement officer, a multi-service officer, and now he's in our training program as a police officer. So that's a special operations. We'll come back to OES here in a bit, I believe. So next up is support services. The group in support services includes our dispatchers as well as our records specialists. Our dispatchers, we have 8 dispatchers and 1 supervisor. They provide 24/7 coverage in our communication center. If someone calls 911 from a cell phone or a landline phone in Morgan Hill, it comes to the police department first, whether you need our friends in the fire department or the police department. As you can see here, that group processed about 13,000 911 calls in 2018. Those are emergency incoming 911 calls, and about 61,500 other non-emergency phone calls and requests for service.
And so, what is a non-emergency phone
That could range from an emergency coming in on a non-emergency line, like a transfer from CHP, or it could also be a question about where's the vehicle. If your vehicle got towed, they're trying to figure out how to get it out. Maybe it was towed from private property, and so we need to run the system and tell them it's with a different tow company. Potentially it's a lost or found animal. That would be a non-emergency call. It can also be someone who calls our non-emergency line when they could have actually called 911. So those are just the differentiated lines that we have, emergency and non-emergency.
The only person who wants to make a non-emergency phone call somebody. All right, just make sure we get these things. A person who makes a non-emergency phone call, are they always talking to a real person?
Yes. Yes. When someone calls the police department, whether it's 911 or a non-emergency line, which is our 779-2101 number, it is answered by our public safety dispatchers. And the beauty of public safety dispatching in Morgan Hill, the question that I didn't answer earlier that I should is our priority 1 response time in Morgan Hill. We recently looked at that. In 2017, it was 4 minutes and 20 seconds. In 2018, it was 3 minutes and 50 seconds. In some agencies you have to ask, well, what is that priority 1 response time? What does it include? Some agencies, it's when they get dispatched, when the dispatcher sends a person on the call. For us, we start that clock when the dispatcher begins their entry into our CAD system, into our computer-aided dispatch system. So what that is, that's the dispatch time to triage the call, to strip it out, the information that's important, to send it to their partner and to keep the button and get our officers on the way, and then the officer's time from their receipt to time of arrival. And when you think about it, that's pretty impressive. We have a 5-minute goal, which is pretty common standard in our industry, in our profession, but to be at 3 minutes and 50 seconds is frankly amazing. And so that is a part of our dispatch system. Because we have 2 dispatchers typically working at any given time. Sometimes we have 1. In fact, we had a pursuit the other night with 1 dispatcher working. That was a challenging time. We had a shooting the other night on church, and that was unfortunately 1 dispatcher working. So we're working for solutions on that because we know that as our city grows, the demands grow. It is stressful to dispatcher. It's a degradation of service. If we have a critical incident, only 1 dispatcher at the console. So in a smaller agency, the reason why we can get to 3 minutes and 20 seconds is if I'm the call taker, the dispatcher is sitting literally 6 to 8 feet away from me within eye contact. And so as that call comes in, that dispatcher can hear the questions that are being asked and knows that it's a significant call. And they're keyed up and ready to go as soon as that call gets to their screen. The Ford store is an example. When we had this shooting at the Ford store, it was literally seconds from when that first call came in to when the dispatcher hit what's called an alert tone to get the officer's attention to say shooting at the Ford store and officers were on the way. That's all they had when they first responded. So that's how we get to a 3-minute and 50-second response time for priority 1 calls. Larger agencies, your call takers are in one room, your dispatchers are in another. You don't have that sharing communication literally across the table from one another. And so that's when you get a longer response time. And in some of those agencies, they count response time for when the call gets dispatched to arrival as opposed to when the call actually comes in. So it's just an important kind of distinction to make when you look at response times and to take a few minutes to talk about the good work that our team is doing related to that. All right, we have 4 records specialists and 1 evidence technician. We are the first, and I think still the only city in the county that uses a paperless filing system for our criminal complaints with the DA's office. So what does that mean? It means that our records team all have scanners at their desk. They scan a case when it comes in. Most of the case is done electronically to begin with in our computer system. And then that case is sent securely to the DA's office for the filing of that complaint. That increases the expediency, the efficiency, and of course reduces the amount of paper we have to print in order to get that case into the justice system. So we use technology pretty extensively today. If I can just kind of go back for a second on field operations. Field ops, we use technology in our crime analysis. We have a crime view program. That's a great crime dashboard that shows throughout our report writing area and is available to others as well. We have a program called Spider Tech. It uses technology to send text messages to victims and to those who have called the police department to inform them about the call that was dispatched and our potential response time if it's going to be delayed, as well as to help connect them with services after the call. So we're using technology in a lot of different ways throughout the organization. OES. So if you think about this, our Office of Emergency Services has a $200,000 budget. And that includes the salary and benefits for Jennifer Ponce, our OES coordinator. So it's really in the overall scope of the budget for the department. There's a lot of work done through volunteers, through our CERT program, through other resources we have with the organization. Because in addition to ensuring our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, is up and running and ready to activate, which we activated for the public safety power shutoffs recently, most of Jennifer's time, Jennifer Ponce, is spent coordinating disaster preparedness efforts for the city. In fact, today is a CERT graduation. Our community emergency response team runs classes multiple times a year, and today is their graduation over the bus yard, learning how to do disaster preparedness type of work and effort. So there's an ongoing effort in ensuring our city is ready for a disaster. And of course, in Morgan Hill, we know that disasters can be earthquakes, disasters can be potentially a flood, depending upon the rainfall and things with the dam. Could be both at the same time. Disasters could be a fire with all the fire prevention, fire efforts, and I know that my colleague Jim Crawford will spend some time talking about that. But disaster preparedness is an important part of what we do, and frankly, for the $200,000 investment, our residents get a tremendous amount of value for that money. Brian.
Chief, could you please touch on a little bit about the advances over the last couple of years and then going forward and report writing that officers have to do and how they're doing now versus how they did 2 or 3 years ago?
when an officer responds to a call, we'll go back to the field operations and how this all works together. A field operations employee responds to the call. An officer responds to the call, takes the report. The officer has one of two ways to enter. They can enter the report in their car. If they choose, they can come back to the station and write the report at the station. Most officers, understandably, prefer to write the reports at the station. It's a more secure environment. They can spread stuff out. They're not cramped in their car trying to use a keyboard that's not ergonomically correct. Lots of good reasons to write the reports at the station, just from a health and wellness perspective. That's all entered into our computer system. And then from there, the report goes to potentially the special operations, which is our detective bureau. If there's work that a patrol officer can't do, if it's an advanced case or late at night, our detectives will do some follow-up on it. And once the case has been complete, they'll go to support services and to records where it's processed. And some of the advances we've had over the last few years included the paperless report writing, include the use of body-worn cameras. Our officers have had body-worn cameras since 2011. And we just went to a new provider and enhanced our body-worn camera service. But our records division will take that entire file, as I mentioned, and with all the digital evidence as well, and send it over to the DA's office for review and prosecution. And so the real advances there are in how we process that case on the back end, and also how the officers catalog their evidence, because now it's all done electronically. Most of it's electronically, instead of having to book it separately into our evidence system. So that's just an advancement there.
You mentioned Spider Tech. Do you see that evolving into a more general purpose way for the public to interact with the department? The interest that I have is making it easy for residents to be able to report near misses with bike and pegs or lightweight, quote, quote, collisions that don't actually turn into an official public interaction with the police.
So I don't see that happening with Spider Tech because that's vendor dependent. Okay. I don't know if that's on their plan for the next few years. However, we also have, as recently introduced, and we haven't yet kicked it off yet officially, we have an app for smartphones, and it's Spanish and English available. And so that app would be the tool that could be used to proactively report things like that. Great. Because we have important traffic concerns on the app. You can go on either the App Store for Apple or Google and download that and have access to it. The reason I haven't announced it, just a sidebar here, our goal was to have the identical app in Spanish and in English. So it was the same platform, looking the same way, just different languages. And Google, as soon as we submitted the app to them in Spanish, they are good to go, ready to publish it. We sent it to Apple, and Apple thought that the app could not be identical to one another because for some spam reason or something like that. So Apple wanted us to create a separate app in Spanish as we had for English. And frankly, that disturbs me because I want to have everything the same. Our community deserves to have, my words, a level playing field, if you would, and the same appearance regardless of the language. And so we're trying to work through with Apple to resolve that complaint, the concern. We weren't able to. And so in the next week or two, we're going to send out a press release and just kick it off and see what Apple does after that.
Great, thank you.
But it is available today, yeah.
Is that what you just described, is that an example of special projects that Ron was asking earlier?
That could very well be. Yeah, could very well be. We were looking for, and so how we're creative about that, we were looking at an app one time ago, and other cities have them, Cancel and Palo Alto as an example. I wasn't too thrilled with the platforms that were out there. Captain Kokesh found some funding through the Youth Task Force and a vendor to do it for about $2,500. Wow. And so we were able to, and part of that was being able to do it in Spanish. And so we were able to use that platform and that funding source to help get it off the ground. Yeah.
Can you explain Signal Tech a little bit more, please?
Spider Tech? Spider Tech, okay. So what we were looking for was a solution. Excuse me. Back up. We know that most people call 911 for police services from a cell phone, either because they don't have a landline in their home anymore, or because they're out in the community and they're calling 911 to report a drunk driver or a fight or something like that. So we had a program before where an officer would get an email address from a crime victim, enter it into our system, and then the system would generate an email from the officer's email account to that crime victim to connect it with services. We found that victims were a little bit reticent to provide an email address all the time, as well as officers, the field for that entry was kind of a couple screens off the main screen, and so officers, it was more consistent about entering that email address in. And so we thought, how else can we do this? Well, how can we, if we're capturing cell phones already, and cell phones are being captured on our main screen, sending a text message might be the next best solution. And so we found a vendor, SpiderTech, that will capture the text message from the field either in our CAD or dispatch system or in our records management system, RMS system, and will then extract it and send a pre-formatted text message with links as appropriate to either the reporting party or to the victim of crime. And so it's a way for us to establish that communication with our RPs and our victims quicker, more efficiently, and timely. And ironically, the survey that you all, I think, looked at last meeting with the polling data, the majority of those respondents responded via text message instead of email. So we know that with smartphones today, that most people are more likely to respond to a text message than it seems, at least for our polling, to a text message than they are to an email. And so SpiderTech is just that one good communication that allows us to reach out to the victim. And there is some potential for some advancements there, and we're trying to figure out how we can enhance that over time as well. All right, so support, so that's so Brian answered your question. That kind of covers it all. And again, we had just going back to some of our advancements in technologies over the last few years. We use license plate reader technology to locate stolen vehicles, as well as other vehicles that are involved in crime. We use, like I said, body-worn cameras and other types of technology as well. And license plate readers, I recognize, can be controversial, but it's a public. We're capturing vehicles in the public space, and then that data is kept for about a year up in San Jose as part of a larger data warehouse that can be searched throughout the county for different crime investigations. Oops. Backwards. All right. So I know that in just conversations I've had throughout the community, sometimes alternate service options come up. And so I wanted to address that in our time together so that people had a chance to talk about that, ask questions that maybe you have or you've heard from others. Currently in Santa Clara County, the cities of Cupertino, Saratoga, and Los Altos Hills contract out police services to the Sheriff's Office in Santa Clara County. And how that is done is just simply through a contract that's established with the Sheriff's Office. And what happens in those situations, of course, is if the deputy is promoted, he or she can be promoted outside of the contract city, back to headquarters, or if a deputy is reassigned, they can be reassigned outside of that. So one of the ways that we are most effective here in Morgan Hill, I touched on our response time earlier, by the way, is the continuity of service providers, the continuity of officers, dispatchers, records personnel, MSOs, etc., that allow for a historical knowledge of the organization and historical knowledge of the community. And so, with a contract provider, you can have, you lose that. You no longer have that continuity of community knowledge. I've been here for 25 years. Captain Paulsgrove has been here for probably 20 years or so, if not longer, and others as well. And so, it's not uncommon for our officers to see someone walking down the street and know that person from prior contacts, and know they're on probation, or know they have a history of burglaries, or know they have a history of stealing cars, or drug abuse, etc., and allows us to be more proactive in our crime fighting efforts. Another option is a joint power authority. So for example, that might look like the formation of a South County Regional Police Department from the San Jose city line to the county line down south, east and west, etc. From a communication and service ability, I think that has some real potential. Because one of the areas where we struggle as a profession is in our sharing of information, whether it's electronically or person to person. We struggle organizationally, even in our own department with that at times. And so that could have some potential. Unfortunately, that would require a lot of political work on the back end, because then you have the county and the sheriff's office having to join that, as well as Gilroy, as well as Morgan Hill. Additionally, we're going to talk about pension reform, and pension reform prohibits the formation of a new department in having an existing employee keep their retirement benefit and join that new organization. So the city of Menifee recently went from a contract to their own department, and everyone that Menifee hires into the police department comes in under the Public Employee Pension Reform Act. So as you'll see here, it's a huge cost saving to the organization, but a degradation in retirement benefit for the employee. So it's really, that really be prohibitive, especially to maintain the same employees you have today. So there's likely some money savings because the retirement, however, likely also prohibitive. So although there also are some alternative service options, I would suggest that the local control of a local department, as well as, and probably equally as important, the community knowledge and departmental knowledge that comes from having your own organization outweighs the potential monetary savings, and the JPA would be a very heavy lift that would require work well beyond the scope of the city of Morgan Hill.
So since we actually hire foreigners to do our fire services, is your feeling about the impact of loss of local control more a police issue or more a general provision of services issue?
I look at it through the lens of law enforcement. There's no question about that. We've had great success with CAL FIRE as our contract provider for fire. Fire has a different model, and it's a response-driven organization as opposed to law enforcement, which is response and calls for service. So if we're looking for someone to respond to calls for service, then potentially a contract provider could work in that, because you're no longer worried about community knowledge, organizational knowledge, because we're not out there looking proactively for people who are hurting our community because their moral compass doesn't point true north. If you're looking for people for officers who are proactive in their work and have a long-term focus for their career and organization, then you want to keep it with them. So some of the current and future challenges that exist today. See there? Okay, good. So next. So I'll just slide it a little bit later for some reason. So housing. We know that you've heard about SB 330 and the potential spike in housing, the loss of our residential development control system. AB 953, which is stop data collection, officers will now, in 2022, officers will have to fill out a card on each stop they make about the demographics of the person being stopped, and statewide. And cities throughout California, the top largest 8 city departments have already started to implement this, as well as San Jose just this last year. It takes anywhere between maybe probably 3 to 5 minutes per person per stop. So if I stop a car with 4 people on board and talk to all 4 people, that's 4 cards I have to fill out. That adds potentially 20 minutes to that contact. So why is that important? It's important to understand that that's lost productivity time. Lost productivity time for community policing, lost productivity time for proactive patrol fighting efforts. I said earlier, we made 25,000 stops, or 25,000 calls for service, and 12 or 13,000 stops. Multiply that times the number of people contacted during those interviews, and do the math on how many additional minutes, hours that is of impact in our time. Sentencing reform. We are seeing, yes.
Do you actually have to write a card? You can't
No,
use
it's electronic. It
data
is.
entry on the phone?
Yes, so it is an electronic or card format.
Oh, okay.
Some agencies can fill out a card and submit it. Other agencies it's done electronically on their computer. Either sent local, it's stored locally, then sent to the Department of Justice.
So is the purpose of that to keep tabs on racial profiling?
Yes, it's the, I sit on the statewide board for that. It's the Racial Identity Profiling Act, and it's to identify demographics of people being stopped by law enforcement, contacted by law enforcement, and then the officer's actions afterwards. So it's the demographics that precede demographics of the person stopped related to their ethnicity and gender identity. It is officers' actions related to were they searched, if they were searched, was it consensual, was it a probation search, or whatever the case may be. Was the person asked to sit on the curb, were they arrested, was there a use of force, etc. So there's are 15 different categories that an officer has to fill out, and then some subcategories underneath that.
I kind of, when you were describing that, I kind of felt that in a way it could be beneficial to find out if there's minors in the car and there's adults, there's human trafficking going on. I mean, I see the benefit in it.
The benefits you described of it seems there's minors in the car, human trafficking, our officers do that proactively when they make the stop, regardless of completing a form, because the officer, excuse me, the officer has to fill out the information based on the officer's perceptions at the time. So not asking someone what's your ethnicity, but by what's my perception of your ethnicity. And so while I think that there can be benefits, and I think that law enforcement needs to always be looking for ways to improve how we serve the community, community also has to be able to look at, say, okay, how can we enhance our relationship with law enforcement? And so I bring it up not to say is it good or bad, but I bring it up to show that there are things that are out there today and in the future that impact our ability, law enforcement's ability, to have the time that we need to effectively serve the community. And that's one.
Can you just be clear, just trying to understand the law, it did not come with a funding source as far as resource allocation as a part of the provision?
Right, there was no funding source from the state of California for this.
And I'm just curious on the background of that. I haven't really read about this. Was it a hotly debated topic, through, ACLU and all that?
This was I think enacted in 2016 or so, and this was a very, there was a lot of conversation at the Capitol around this when this was enacted. Law enforcement was very engaged. While this was being debated in Sacramento, at the time I was the chair of our law legislation committee for the California Police Chiefs Association. So I was involved in the conversation here, and currently I sit on the board for the Racial Identity Profile Act. So yes, to your question, it was a very there's a lot of conversation around this time. The next bullet point there is sentencing reform. Our officers are seeing, in fact, there's an article online talking about Home Depot and Home Depot's loss throughout the country, as well as Lowe's. We are seeing an increase in property theft, especially from our retailers. We are seeing an increase in burglaries, residential and otherwise. And a lot of that is related to drug abusers who are trying to feed their habit. Many may remember an incident we had in downtown where a guy went to different shops in downtown asking for money. First it was his truck broke down, and his dad needed medicine, and some of our downtown merchants and residents were very gracious and gave this person some money. And then we found out he'd done the same thing from, I think, Kotati down to King City, trying to make $1,000 a day to feed a $500 a day opioid habit. As fewer people, so drug classification was reduced from felonies to misdemeanors. Why that's important is because the felony was the key was what people needed to get into drug treatment. So fewer drug abusers are seeking treatment because they no longer have a need to to reduce a felony to a misdemeanor by completing drug treatment programs. We're seeing that suspects are more transitory in their criminal enterprise. Mountain View, cities along the 101 corridor are seeing retail thefts and auto burglaries at an alarming rate, alarming increase. You may recall seeing an article or hearing or seeing on TV where Ulta was hit, I think, 8 times in 6 months by people who just walked in, grabbed stuff off the counter, put it in a bag, and walked out. Just like you see in an Apple store, just change the name. We see it, we have seen it recently also at Dick's Sporting Goods. People walk in, they're shopping for Adidas that day, they walk over to the Adidas rack, they grab the Adidas jackets, and then just walk out. Maybe the next day it's Reebok, whatever the case may be. So we are seeing that. Then they go down to Gilroy and do the exact same thing. And what we're seeing once we have this suspect identified is they're not from Morgan Hill. In fact, over half the people we arrest at the police department are not from Morgan Hill. And so the transitory nature of crime, that's something that's changed over the last few years, Brian, to your point earlier, has increased the service demands and the impacts on our community. It used to be when I started 20-something years ago that green belt from San Jose, that Morgan Hill is like no man's land, right? People wouldn't come down from San Jose, it was too far to go. We still struggle with our business community, but we're working on that. Okay? They wouldn't come down from San Jose, they wouldn't come up from south of Gilroy. It was just we're here, we're on the map. And that was a good thing as related to criminal enterprise. Unfortunately, that no longer exists today. Of course, increased traffic. We know that, I think Chris touched on it last time, that we have a cut-through traffic issue, but I think 25 to 30% of our traffic going north or south in the morning or afternoon cuts through Morgan Hill. And that has an increased issue there. Our roads are certainly more impacted during those heavy commute times. We are working on quality of life issues around homelessness. Homeless-related calls are up about 200% over the last 3 years, as well as mental health. Continuing to work in the area of mental health, continuing to try and find solutions to an ever-increasing problem. And one might ask, well, why is that growing today? I would attribute it directly to a lot of drug-induced mental illness. There are a lot of studies out there that show that drug use earlier in life at a heavier use does lead to mental illness later on. So I think we're seeing that today, some of the impacts of that over time. So,
or do the officers of Morgan Hill PD, are they trained as like mediators?
crisis intervention?
Yes.
Great question.
Yeah.
Thank you for teeing that up for me. Because I'm proud to say that over 90%, probably 95% of our officers and some of our dispatchers have gone through the 40-hour crisis intervention training that's put on by the county. And we are very diligent about ensuring that our officers attend that class and have that training because it is necessary. And we are seeing that increasing need in the area of mental health. So we have a significant investment in training, and our CIT program is part of that as well. Other quality of life issues, we can talk about the housing affordability and how that also, I think, relates to mental health and homelessness. I think those are all correlated in one way or another. Charles?
About the incident that happened at the Gilroy Garlic Festival, how do you see that affecting events here in Morgan Hill in terms of security?
I think that the Gilroy Garlic Festival was a real eye-opener to what can happen. The Garlic Festival is probably the most secure special event that we have in South County. You have full 360-degree perimeter fencing. You have gates where people are wanted and have officers present at those gates. Then you have roving teams of officers throughout the event. Yet still someone with a deranged mind is able to manipulate or to thwart those security efforts. So how I see it changing. At the Taste of Morgan Hill, you may have seen officers with long guns walking around paired up with other officers. I think that's likely to be a more likely occurrence going forward. I see that we will need to increase our staffing at some of those special events. We are looking to possibly adopt the same strategy that Gilroy does and have officers from other agencies help support our officers at those events. We have about 15 to 20 special events a year in Morgan Hill. While not all of them require officers to be present, many of them do. And the officers who are there are working out of them on their day off. You have to be paid overtime. But there's only so much overtime that an officer wants, and then balance that with actually wanting to have time off with their family. So I see us looking for ways to be creative about that, but to always prioritize the security and safety of our guests and residents. So I can't tell you exactly what it means, but I can tell you that it likely will mean increased officers in events, potentially officers from different agencies, and looking for ways to better secure our events in downtown specifically. The one event that gets me a little bit, that it has for even before I was a chief, it always rose to my radar, our 4th of July parade. It is an amazing community event, and we should continue to have that regardless of what we do. However, we should also look for ways to better secure that, because that is a domestic terrorism event that some of the deranged mind could be just a tragedy in our community and mark that festival, the festival for our nation's independence and forevermore. So there are things we can do to strengthen our response.
Dave, touch a little bit more on the mental health issue where a call for service comes in and it's for the same person it was 2 nights before, with Hellfire and police have to show up. The cost, the cost involved, and also the out-of-service time. For the same person has a problem. And how many times does that happen?
Yeah, we do have some folks that are, so the question was about how often do we respond to frequent, the same person over the greater increase in their greater frequency. And unfortunately, it is all too common. And these individuals, one in particular, even has good health insurance. So it's not about not having insurance and not being engaged with a therapist. It's about still being in crisis. And so if we respond to a mental health call, we may respond with the fire department, depending upon the person's state at the time. If they took pills, as an example, fire would likely respond to help ensure their physical safety. We'll typically send at least 2 officers, sometimes more, to that call. There's the time to detain the individual, to respond, to interview, to investigate, to detain the individual, then either transport them ourselves to psych services in San Jose, or to wait with them until a third-party ambulance provider arrives and transports them to San Jose. Our third-party ambulance provider could be 90 minutes at times delayed. And so it's actually faster for us to take them up and then come back instead of having to assign someone to watch them during that 90-minute period. So, and then there are repeated calls. So one of the things we're trying to work with the county on is a mobile mental health crisis response team. Other counties have this. You would think that Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, with the affluence that's here both locally from our local governments, would be able to fund this. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get that off the ground completely, where there would be mental health clinicians that could respond to that scene, to relieve the officers on scene, and help resolve that issue without the officers being present and save the officers time. So we're working on it, but it's not off the ground yet.
I just had a quick question about the housing affordability. Do you see that as a problem because of there being low income or the age demographic?
Sure, I see housing affordability. So for example, we have some newer apartment complexes here in Morgan Hill, and we have been responding out there frequently. When the lodge first opened, the management of a facility is key to its success and our success. When the lodge first opened on Barry Avenue in Butterfield, we were out there frequently, both the fire department and police. And so we worked proactively with management to help reduce those calls for service. Those calls for service now are a lot more manageable. But affordable housing typically means higher density. And when you put people together in higher densities that aren't used to living in that environment, that generally leads to increased calls for service. And And so that's what we're seeing there. As we have increased in affordable housing conversations, Morgan Hill has 1 in 8 of our units is deemed affordable. We don't have typical frequent calls in our below market rate program. It's more likely to happen in our higher density areas, just based on closer proximity to people. Shared walls, shared floors, shared ceilings, can lead to increased calls.
Chief, if I can tie on to that, because the last 2 questions have had to do with the integration of fire and police, and going back to Brian's question, also on the EMS side, emergency medical services side, there are community paramedicine program pilot projects that have been worked throughout the state of California. The one project that really took ground here in Santa Clara County is one that Gilroy Fire is doing right now to off-ramp individuals with behavioral health issues from not being part of the EMS system. So they are tracking and working to get the correct resources and services for those that are calls for service for people with behavioral health problems. And we'll eventually see the results of that, but the initial information that we received is that that's very positive. We're basically able to put EMS and fire resources back in service sooner because we have a way to off-ramp out of the emergency services process people with behavioral health behavioral health issues.
Behavioral health and the mental go together.
Exactly. Yes, very typically. And to Chief Swain's comment, yes, usually there's some kind of substance abuse issue that causes the mental health issue that causes them to call 911 for help. Yeah, or whether it's somebody in the public calling for that help.
A lot of times they don't want help.
Right, and those calls are very integrated. It requires careful coordination between police and fire.
So there's actually ongoing intervention.
Yes, yeah. I think we have a very strong behavioral health program within Santa Clara County. Mm-hmm. It's getting individuals who call that have an emergent need into those programs, into those resources, that there's not an easy way for us to do that. When you call 911, your 911 is police and fire and an ambulance. Those are the resources that are part of that. And there are policies and procedures in place within Santa Clara County to address that. Having paramedicine programs, community paramedicine programs will help to improve services for people with specific needs.
And so one of the things that's happening right now with the county recently purchased St. Louis Hospital, and their intention, their goal is to expand mental health services or behavioral health services in South County at the St. Louis site. So there is a ray of hope out there, and that services will improve, as well as to include an emergency psychiatric services intake facility at St. Louis, and that will lessen the burden on us in South County by not having to go to San Jose. So that's something that is out there. Yeah, Charles.
This regards schools. Do you have any input into the design of the schools that are being remodeled now in the city, or is it up to the school districts to figure that out?
So we are involved in the conversations around schools. I don't know that we're looking specifically at each facility for design, with design input. I also know that the district works with their architects and the statewide organization with the schools, going to do this up name right now, in their design development to ensure safety. So it is something that's looked at by the schools and then also looked at by us, but frankly the work that the schools do in their design, we haven't found a need for much correction of that.
As you probably know, I do a lot of school work, not here in the city of Morgan Hill, and we don't have input from the city's police departments. We do it on our own, and I think it's a flaw in a way, in that you have a lot more experience in how this could be handled in terms of an emergency, in terms of fencing, electronic monitoring of students as they come in and out of how they come into the school. And I think it's important for you to be involved with that.
And so we are involved through our city school liaison meeting. We have the quarterly meetings as well as checkups in between that period of time with staff, where we do look at a school design layout, especially for traffic issues. One of the big traffic issues we have today is Dunn Avenue and Nordstrom School, for the safety of our kids and parents and other motorists that are out there. And so we're looking for ways with the school district design something that helps to alleviate the safety issues there. We did it at PA Walsh here recently, moving some of the traffic over onto Peak Avenue off of Main Avenue, as well as improving the sidewalk area there in front. And so we are involved in some of the safety design, safety work, just at various levels in that process. So the school does most of the design work on the front end, and frankly, the work that they're doing now with fencing and access points and things of that nature, and building layout and design, tend to resolve most of the interior safety concerns that we have. And it's very much front of their mind as well as a school district.
You mentioned a ray of hope with health services in the county. Is there a ray of hope with our new governor in terms of supporting the Superior Court and perhaps actually using our courthouse for its original purpose so that your officers aren't traveling back and forth and our residents aren't traveling back and forth to San Jose?
So I don't know that that's on the governor's radar right now. I do know that when the courthouse here reduced services, especially for traffic citations, we were very involved and engaged with the local court to bring traffic services back. We were the first satellite facility to have traffic court reinstated. And so that's a direct impact, by the way. The reduction of services here in South County is a direct impact of the San Jose Police Department having to pull their specialty units back, because courts are funded transactionally, and the court's funding in Santa Clara County was reduced because the number of transactions dropped dramatically when San Jose had to almost shutter their entire traffic unit. So that means less money to the court. It means they centralize services in San Jose and reduce services in the outlying satellite areas, whether it was Palo Alto or South County or other facilities. And so we've been very good about being proactive as a region, both at the staff and elected level, to bring some of those services back online here in South County. For many good reasons, but primarily because of the distance it takes for us to get to San Jose, much like our officers or our community members as well. It's a longer distance, it's a bigger impact, public transportation options are limited at best, and so all those reasons.
Thank you.
So the need. Lots of great questions. I'm trying to watch the time as well. I know we have, I don't want to cut into my colleagues' time. You might turn a water cannon at me.
Just really quick, because you're on the subject of school, are there officers that actually go into the schools, whether they're elementary or high schools, and develop relationships with the students?
Yes, we have 2 school resource officers. We have a budget for a 3rd, and we'll get into some of that work with our schools. Field operations, so our need. And again, this is the need today based on our population. Again, in 1992, we had 26,000 people and about 35 sworn, and we'll talk about that. But 1 sergeant, 3 officers. What does this allow us to do? It allows us to have a different schedule. Currently, our officers work 12-hour shifts. 12 hours is a long time to be at the top of your game in a safety profession. And so having these additional resources will allow us to implement a hybrid schedule where at least half of our department could work on a 4-10 shift. It also gives us more coverage during peak periods of time because you have 2 patrol teams on the street instead of 1. And so you have an overlap period there where you can actually increase the service levels by having more officers on the street. Increasing our special operations staffing to a general crimes detective. Again, able to do more follow-up. We had a burglary at Ulta recently, and this crew was in San Jose, they were in Gilroy, they were in Salinas, they were in Morgan Hill. Our detective took that case on because he was able to actually have the time to do it and worked with Ulta and their retail loss prevention folks to help identify the suspects. They're not in custody yet, but we think we know who they are. He called the other agencies, and they hadn't even looked at the case because it hadn't risen to that level. So it's important for us to be able to do that work because that's about putting cases together, doing investigations, solving crimes, and preventing other crimes from occurring. A training coordinator. Currently, all our department training is coordinated by an administrative sergeant, and while that works out well, it can be better if it's centralized to one person who's in that role for the long haul. You don't have to retrain someone every few years. They develop an expertise. They develop relationships with the training community, and they're able to get officers into classes as well as to coordinate that training with relative ease instead of having to relearn that every 2 or 3 or 4 years. And then finally, information technology technician. IT services in Morgan Hill are supported by a total of 4 people in the entire city. The police department has 1 person assigned to the department, but he's also assigned to other efforts throughout the city. As IT needs grow, and we know they will continue to grow in time, especially as our department grows, we will need to increase the availability or the dedicated resources to the police department. And having a dedicated IT person is someone who will know our systems and know the requirements around security for our police department, which is higher than other areas, and be able to better serve and respond to our information technology needs. Because when our computers go down, then that can really impact our ability to provide services, even in emergency situations and also in ongoing operations. So what does crime look like in Morgan Hill? Well, this is just a snapshot of where we are for the last 3 years as well as for 2018. I like to look at data on a more longer period of time instead of just year over year. That's why I have a 3-year average up there for crime. So you can look at how crime is trending over a longer period of time. And then, of course, January to September. You can see that our larceny, our property crime, is certainly increasing. This is trending up still. We have the holiday season ahead of us where crime will actually probably spike a little bit there as well. We are proactive in our crime fighting in our retail centers. You may see some police cars parked at Target or at Walmart or other areas. Those are cars that are parked there without any weapon systems in them and are left there as a way to deter other criminals from committing crimes through a decoy car operation. Our aggravated assaults, I'm very encouraged to see this go down. I don't take credit for reductions in crime. I don't want the blame when the numbers turn back around. However, I am very encouraged that aggravated assaults are down because in my mind, an aggravated assault is can be a homicide with a different position of the knife or a different entry point for a bullet. And so I'm very encouraged to see that these are trending down, have over time. The 2 homicides you see here are attributed to the Ford store. And then burglary, larceny, etc. Is typically our property crimes are trending up. They're trending up at a decent clip. So that's part of our crime in Morgan Hill. So I know the script was looking at the budget, so I want to talk about one of our biggest budget impacts and how that affects our bottom line and the general fund. So in 2012, the state passed and Governor Brown signed pension reform, Public Employee Pension Reform Act, or PEPRA, as it's also known. And so when we hired, so I am under the classic 3 at 50. So for safety employees, we earn 3% of our salary a year in service years and we retire at the age of 50 if we're eligible to retire. A new employee earns 2.7% and they can retire at 57. So they're eligible to retire and start drawing on the pension at the age of 57 instead of the age of 50. And so what does that mean? It means that from a cost perspective, a top step officer under PEPRA, the city pays about $18,300 a year, and under PERS, the city pays about $70,000 a year for that same employee. So as we transition more officers as they retire from Classic to PEPRA, the city, as you can see there, saves about $50,000 a year, which is the number here at the bottom, the $24,190 number at the bottom of that slide. And so as we move forward over time, that number will continue to change. Currently, we have about 16 or so of our 42 officers fall under PEPRA, and the balance are under 3 at 50. So that's just as a way of looking at some of those numbers there. We had some recent turnover either through retirements or through transition to other agencies in this last year, and I think we transitioned about 6 or 7 from PERS to PEPRA in the last year alone.
Excuse me, so you're not eligible for Social Security, right?
So the question was about Social Security. The city does not contribute to Social Security. I am eligible for Social Security because I worked in the private sector prior to joining local employment or public employment. But as a public employee, the city does not contribute to Social Security, so I'm not eligible for it absent that.
Another point to add to that question, just in general, is that your benefits in Social Security are reduced when you, for the number of years that you have been out of the Social Security system. I too worked in the private sector before coming to the city, and my benefits are reduced quite significantly, actually, even though my greater number of years was in the private sector.
Thank you for that lovely reminder. Okay, any other questions about classic versus PEPRA, retirement, budgetary impacts, etc.?
Chief, if I could, I'd like to make a comment that the same thing exactly works for fire services and through, I have one.
Oh, you have
And so through the benefit adjustment, the benefit adjustment over time, the city will see a realization as far as fire services and the administrative costs as well. As more PEPRA employees enter into CAL FIRE, there will be a change in that formula as to what is charged to the city in actual cost.
And something that Morgan Hill doesn't offer that other cities do, and the state as well, is we don't have a lifetime medical program where the city pays for our medical insurance in our retirement. And I think the county of Santa Clara does, and the state, and some other local municipalities do as well. But that would be another huge unfunded liability that the city does not have, that other jurisdictions do, related to our financial sustainability long term. So it's important to understand. So this is just a slide. You may be wondering, well, how do we stack up in terms of our officers per capita? Well, first off, the line that's up and down, the orange line, is our arrests per officer. So you can see there that Morgan Hill has 50, 2017 or 18, I believe, 2017, had 50 arrests per officer, which is the highest in the county of the cities that are represented there. It is the highest in the county, period.
What's the time period of the 50 arrests?
It's 2018, or 17. The entire year. So over the entire year, we made, let's say, 2,000 arrests, divided by the number of officers we had at that time that were not filled, but that were authorized, is 50 arrests per officer on average. So some our patrol officers may probably make more than that, because that includes people like me, who don't make 50 arrests a year. It would include our detectives, who investigate all my cases, but they probably don't make 50 actual arrests themselves. So it's the average of all of our sworn employees. But you can see here that we also had 0.89. That number now, with the addition of 3 officers, is probably 0.9192 area. But in 2018, we're at 0.89. And you can see here other cities, Delaware at 0.15, Palo Alto 1.17. Sunnyvale is a bit of an anomaly because Sunnyvale is a public safety department. They have police and fire. And so you can see 1.36. I think that likely includes some of the fire side as well. They have a lower fire staffing because their police officers on patrol will supplement fire for their major fire calls. So they're a dual purpose agency.
For police officer per capita, was there an optimum number, or is there such a thing?
It's a difficult conversation to have because different factors affect the level of staffing. The earlier slide, we used a formula from the International Association of Chiefs of Police to determine what we thought was needed for our department. So having 5 more officers on staff, 47, probably put us at about right close to 1.1. To me, that would be a great place to start.
Okay. One more question. So comparing San Jose to Morgan Hill, the officers per 1,000, it's roughly the same, right? 0.9. But the arrests per officer is like 50 compared to 16 is...
What I can tell you is that San Jose's number is probably a little bit higher today on their numbers because they've hired a lot of new officers recently. but I don't know if that number if the 16 has increased or not. When San Jose had the voters pass retirement reform in San Jose, that created an environment where a lot of people left the agency. We hired some of those folks who are working here today. And so the agency is rebuilding from where they were previously prior to that pension reform. And then the voters actually repealed that pension reform as well. And they went back to a PERS standard. What happened was San Jose was ahead of pension reform throughout the state, and they had a pension reform that was more aggressive than what the state ended up doing. And so they were at a competitive disadvantage as it relates to pension. And so what they found, they had to roll that back and at least align with the state's pension reform program. And they have 2 tiers now, tier 1, tier 2, just like we do. So some key takeaways. The numbers that we have here, the sergeant, degree officers, and detective, that's our need today. If SB 330 has the effect that we think it will, and all of a sudden our population grows, that doesn't take into effect the potential increases in demands for services related to a sudden spike in population growth. And so it's important to recognize that that's our need today. That's even before we look at potential population spikes related to SB 330. Additionally, the time that is spent on issues of homelessness is a commitment for our officers. We have one of our detectives who's assigned as our homeless outreach officer. We have a great program down here that started in collaboration with the city and our interfaith community, and that's the Safe Parking Program. That has been tremendously impactful and helpful in helping people find longer-term housing. Unfortunately, what our officers find on a regular basis is the majority of people that we contact who are living on the streets are not interested in participating in those types of services. They're interested in staying in the current situation that they're in, living on the street without any rules or structure we have to follow. And so as our work there increases, obviously increases our time, it increases the impact on our community. We get calls on a regular basis about people inquiring about someone who is homeless, looking for either services for them or other ways to help, and that's just, it's ongoing. The nature of our job is changing. 25 years ago when I was in briefing, I would hear the guys in the back of the room say, this job isn't what it was when I started 20 years ago. Now I'm in the position to say, this job isn't what it was when I started 20 years ago. Body-worn cameras. I meant to bring mine today, but I came straight from home. I don't have it with me. But body-worn cameras, the issues around homelessness and mental health, the scrutiny of law enforcement today is greater than it ever has been before. We're grateful in South County to have a very strong, supportive community towards law enforcement. It's also one of the challenges that we face when we talk about recruiting, having to filling the vacant officer positions. Is impacted by the changing nature of the job. Speaking of hiring, it takes us 6 months or so from interview date to hire date when someone starts an academy. It could be as low as 4 months. We have our record set at 30 days, interview date to start date, so we can be flexible, we can be aggressive and move quickly when we need to. However, it takes time to hire someone. It takes 10 months for that person from the academy and field training program. So if the council were to authorize these positions in the July budget, which I know that they don't have the funds to do that, but theoretically if they did, it would take us probably 18 months before that person's actually on the street. And so that, again, that just takes time to run through that process. If we had a recession in Morgan Hill, which there's not a recession forecast, but if there were a recession in Morgan Hill and we had a hiring freeze, that would help further delay that timeline. And so there's all different factors in that. I see there's some questions. Yeah, Susan.
Chief, earlier on, maybe 5-10 minutes ago, you spoke about hiring some of the police from San Jose. So those individuals came in a trained capacity. We just had to integrate them into our system. Are we competitive with the other communities in what we're paying our officers?
I don't remember the salary survey. Captain Paulsgrove was involved in that conversation recently during contract negotiations. We are competitive in our geographic location in that we can draw from Hollister or other places south where the cost of living is less. In terms of our salary, I don't know the exact answer to that question, Shane or Joe, where are we in our salary?
Right at the median level. Yeah. So the city selected, comparator agencies that we usually agreed upon with our POA bargaining units. And those are the agencies that we compare ourselves to. And then the council separately has a policy, as it relates to employee retention and recruitment and so forth. And the council policy dictates that we want to be right at the median level, right in the middle. So as we, as other agencies up north, have probably seen, San Jose as an example, I think, after the recession area, their salaries weren't as competitive, but they are all catching up as well. But yeah, other than that, that's essentially what the council's policy is, and I think we always try to align ourselves at the median level.
What I also know, though, is if you look at the second chart there behind you, which is that this is the value that our community receives. Our workload is one of the highest in the county in terms of calls for service, reports taken, and arrests made. And so you can see Gilroy is pretty close there, and Campbell at 48, but to be the highest in the county speaks to the value of that work.
Thank you.
I mean, as a chief, I'll always advocate for more resources from our department for our officers. And it's because that's important to have that to maintain that competitiveness in the marketplace.
The Community Peace Academy and the volunteers in policing, I mean, what are the credentials of these people and how much authority do they have?
Their authority is no greater than any other resident in Morgan Hill. The credentials are they are a diverse group of folks, some from the high-tech industry, some who are retired, and they just have a heart for service.
I'm just wondering if you can go to the other slide, the last slide, the key takeaways. Every time I see a key takeaway slide, I'm both humbled and sobered by the experience themselves. But just looking at the line of sight and what you feel you need today for resources, and then trying to lay that against the recruiting timeline process, to scale to that level almost seems like we're behind the eight ball, because as time passes, that scale is going to require an exponential growth. Do we have any alternate sources or contingency funds to bring us up to a point so your line of sight today is actually realized, and then as you project in the future? Because looking at 18 months down the road as it relates to today's need, time we get to that point, if we get funding allocated, we're going to be exponentially even in greater need then. So I'm having a hard time trying to scale this to budget and trying to understand are there alternate sources that we can be thinking about that would allow us to get that line of sight today to bring us up to a scale that makes sense, and then at that point looking forward. And I don't know if I'm articulating that comment right, but it's always so humbling to see these numbers.
So if council were to authorize 5 new positions in the July budget, we would, we have one officer opening today. We would dedicate more resources into a broader recruiting strategy to expedite some of that. Hopefully that would involve hiring some what we call lateral officers, previously trained officers, as Susan mentioned. They're at the Lateral Academy, and you can compress that timeline down even further. And so recently we've hired probably 6 or 7 new officers, because council authorized 3 new positions plus some attrition. And we were more proactive when we had a greater number of vacancies in our recruiting. So if we had the 5 positions, we would work to compress that down and balance our hiring with academy, pre-academy, as well as laterals to compress the timeline down, but also to have some to diversify the agency.
I have a question about it may be similar to the one that was just asked. You mentioned you'd like at least 1.3 million additional dollars, and the only way that I can see that we could do that is, well, there's 2 ways. One is a tax on us all, which is one of the options we're pursuing. The other is tax revenues from various sources like hotels. but there are limits to your favorability on that scale of something that's not very impactful that would generate money to something that's very impactful to you that would generate money. Do you have some sense of a scale, or you would say to us as we go through this process, I sure wish we could have 3 more hotels, or I wish we could do something that would that we could use in our discussions later on?
I am supportive of obviously sales tax, revenue generating businesses and ventures in Morgan Hill, that as long as the impact on the community isn't greater than the offset of revenue that comes in. Just as an example, a car dealership. Typically, a car dealership is a great revenue source. There's not a big drain on our service levels or for the police department or for the city for a typical car dealer. In hotels, we have 2 hotels that want to come into Morgan Hill, but as we know, there's a referendum on the ballot in March to prohibit them from coming in at that location. And so, while I can be an advocate for economic development, and I believe that I'm a pretty strong advocate for economic development, the community has to obviously be willing to grow in that direction. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but...
You did answer it in a way. I probably would have been more direct and say there was an initiative that was denied by the city council, I think it was last week or the week after, about dispensaries. And you spoke about not favoring that, and yet some analysis had it as a way to generate between $250,000 and $700,000 a year. I'm sure the statistics can be skewed one way or the other.
And just yesterday, the state raised the rate on the tax rate at the state level on cannabis.
Right.
So that will have an effect on what local agencies can charge, so that sales are not driven underground into the black market. And so, as the states continue to look for money from the cannabis industry, there's a downstream effect on that on the local municipality and their ability to charge a rate that keeps it below a 30% cumulative tax rate. So it's
I see that we have difference of ways to look at this differently, and certainly I appreciate your input in it. I guess is my question is, what is it that we would say to ourselves? Well, we really would like, and this is not probably a great example, a lot more liquor stores in town to generate more money, which would be obviously something you would not favor.
Sure.
But can you give us some sense, maybe not right at the moment, of things that you wish we could look for or try to go after? Or
I just touched on earlier, I think any type of sales tax generating business that generates revenue that is not offset by public safety or community impact. And for me, that's car dealerships, hotels, the first 2 always come to mind. Of course, hotels are driven by the market. And car dealers are driven by a strong economy, because when we have a recessionary economy, people are less likely to buy a new car. And so being overly reliant on sales tax is a volatile transaction. You have to have obviously reserves to offset the volatility of a sales tax dip. So without speaking specifically, I'm not, there's the retail sector. The retail sector is compressing because more people are buying stuff online. Also, because people steal stuff from our stores, they also sell it online. And so the e-commerce actually hits both sides of that. It hits the suspect side, they can find buyers for the stolen goods, and then the businesses can sell online, which bypasses local sales tax revenue. So, yeah. I was going to go here first, and I'll look back.
I was just going to add to that really quickly. I think it's a great question, because I know that the city's been having discussions about the type of businesses that we want to attract, and specifically we've been talking recently about that distribution center. From my point of view, I don't care what goes in there, but I do think that maybe a distribution center could generate a lot of income without a lot of stress on community services. So having some input, whether that really doesn't make much difference, whether it's a car dealership or if it was a office building, having a good understanding of how that benefits the community financially and giving input back that way would be useful in these discussions.
If I could add one comment to that, just to make for clarity, we don't know for sure that it's a distribution center. There will likely be distribution as some component of it but since there's so much controversy out in the community, I just want to clarify. We still haven't seen a final plan on that, but yes, there's revenue associated with that, and once we have a better understanding of the actual businesses that might go in there.
Right, I was really just looking at it more as additional information for, I was just looking at it as additional information for making these kinds of decisions. It would be useful. Thank you.
I'm curious about any pipelines that you might be working on, help developing. You mentioned graffiti abatement as a stepping stone. I believe both departments have explorer posts. And there are public safety curriculums perhaps at community colleges. I'm just sort of wondering about, other than lateral transfers, how you might.
So we do a really good job, I think, of developing folks internally. We have our Explorer program, and we have two cadets that work in our records department who are college, high school or college students who have interest in law enforcement. They're in a paid position. We also have our animal services officer, our multi-service officers. And what we've seen is we've seen a recent progression from either an explorer or an intern into an animal services officer role, and an MSO role, and then also our two MSOs being hired full-time as police officers. And so I think we're going to have a very good track record of growing our own internally, and there's benefit to that because then the person knows the organization, knows the culture, and the organization knows them as well. They know what's expected of them, and we know what to expect from them in return. So I think we do a really good job of growing our internal talent.
Thank you.
Chief Swing, I know that the police needs more money, and one approach would be to say that a sales tax would provide, money for services that the community thinks is important. So to that end, what are the three biggest complaints you get from people in Morgan Hill about police service?
Well, I think that the concerns, first of all, I don't receive many complaints about our service. I do receive complaints about issues that are occurring in Morgan Hill, but not the services that we're providing. Traffic is typically the top of the list. And I think until 101 is widened, until Hale Avenue is punched through to DeWitt, it will continue to be a top item for our community in response, whether it's downtown, our thoroughfares, neighborhoods, etc. And council added a third traffic officer to help us address those complaints. Another common issue is quality of life issues. That's why I touched on it so much here today. Our officers have been are very good about connecting with folks who are homeless and looking for ways of connecting to services. And if they're not interested in connecting to services and they are doing things like urinating in public or are drunk in public on a regular basis, then we will enforce the laws as our community wants. An example of that, we were at Eric's, if you listen to the command staff, we're at Eric's, we saw a guy panhandling at TJ Maxx, who we recognized. And so it's okay, what does he do from here? So he panhandles in the community, is gracious, he gives us some money. And then officers and unmarked cars kind of follow to see where he's going to go from there. Where do you think he went? He didn't go to Starbucks. He doesn't have a caffeine habit.
Liquor store?
He went to the liquor store where he bought his typical bottle, whatever he prefers. And then he dealt with it later on that day as a result of his immigration. So so we're so homelessness, quality of life issues is probably the traffic and homelessness are the top two. For sure.
So, sorry, Maureen.
I'm going to interrupt for just a moment because we have 45 minutes left of our scheduled time and we haven't even begun the fire conversation. I believe both the chiefs would be willing to hang around a little bit for questions after, but I'm concerned we're not going to get into fire.
I can ask them later. I can send it.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to recommend maybe if we have questions, we can definitely get those questions via email, and then we'd be more than happy to circle back and
Yeah, and I would send them out to the entire group if we don't have time to get all the questions. I mean, it's a big topic and it's an important topic, so these are all really valuable questions. But I'm just concerned that we need to at least spend some time on fire.
So remember,
Just one quick statement. I think what we all have to realize and what the citizens have to realize in our community is that these costs go up about 2 to 3% a year. So that's going to add more to what the needs are. I don't think the community realizes that the burden cost goes up that much.
And my key takeaway is, all the things we have here that needs, it's driven by the fact that we're 8,760 hours a year. That it's 24/7, 365, and that's what our community needs and deserves and expects, and that's the service levels that we in public safety are committed to providing. So I appreciate the opportunity and all the questions, some great questions. If you have more questions, as Maureen said, send them via email. I'll be around afterwards as well. I'll take some questions, and I'll turn it over to my colleague and friend from the fire service, Chief Crawford.
Good morning, I just need half a second here to sit down and put some notes in here. I want to make sure it says everything, so it's fine. Bear with me.
Nice job. You disappointed you didn't need a first thing?
No, so it's a good day.
I want to make sure I'm moving correctly. Okay. Thank you. My name is Jim Crawford. I'm the Assistant Chief of Fire Service for Cooperative Fire Services for CAL FIRE. My primary job is to manage the Morgan Hill Fire Department and the adjoining South Santa Clara County Fire District. The position has existed for about a year and a half. Before that, I basically managed all the CAL FIRE operations within Santa Clara County. So that included the state mission as well as the two local government departments. The great benefit for me is the ability to be able to concentrate and work on programs within the local government for the city of Morgan Hill and for the fire district, which is a county-dependent fire district that completely encompasses the areas around the city. So, very enjoyable job. I have worked. I'm sorry, Doug's not here. I've actually, there you are, Doug. 19 years in Morgan Hill. And as a CAL FIRE employee, I commuted for 13 years and I lived here 6 years. I did a quick calculation because one of the questions about having somebody that comes in that does a cooperative agreement or a contract is what kind of a turnover or what do you see as far as the makeup of your department and who's local and who's not. Many of our employees, just because of their upbringing, their family, where they come from, they live outside of the community, but approximately 2/3 of the employees that work in the program here in Morgan Hill have been here since the beginning, including all of our company officers at the captain level. I believe other than one who recently retired and had worked in South County for almost his entire career, the rest of them have been here and working in Morgan Hill since 2013. And that really speaks to all of you and to this community and how much we all are dedicated and love working here. There have been opportunities for all of them to promote or to transfer to move to other places, but they all, just like all of you, desire to work in this community because of what you bring to us and the great relationship that we have with the public here. So we're absolutely thrilled to be here. And to that point, I have some other items that we're going to bring up as part of the presentation to that. Chief Swing brought up, and I really appreciate that number, 8760. He mentioned the typical 40-hour employee, which most of us are familiar with, works about 2,080 hours as part of their 40-hour work week. The A firefighter works at a different schedule. The federal government says firefighters have a 53-hour clock instead of a 40-hour clock. In order to make it work evenly on a 24-hour schedule, firefighters typically work a 56-hour work week. That's 29/12. So that was a municipal firefighter typically works that many hours in a year as part of their job. And I want to write that number down because the duty shift for a CAL FIRE employee is a 72-hour work week, 3 days on, 4 days off. That equals 3,744 hours. So this employee being a 1, this employee works a 1.5, basically, one and a half times more than the 40-hour employee. And the 72-hour employee works a 1.8 times the amount that a typical 40-hour employee works. So when you see that 8760, it kind of gives you an idea of how many employees you need in order to fill one position every day on an apparatus. The city currently staffs 2.5. They're budgeted 2.5. We share one apparatus, and the staffing of that apparatus with the South Santa Clara County Fire District. So we say the city is basically funding 8 positions per day to staff its fire department. Just to go into some history, we don't have a lot of great information about the history of the department from time of incorporation to 1950. That information is out there, but it's kind of scattered all over the place. But I can tell you that in the early 50s, the town was about 1,600 people, and the city had one fire station downtown, basically at Main and Monterey. And from there, they responded to the calls for service, mostly fire at that time, to the city of Morgan Hill. Had a strong volunteer fire force, and in that time, that was very typical of a rural community like Morgan Hill. In the 70s, as the community was growing, and there was a lot of growth within Santa Clara Valley, the city made a determination they needed to have additional fire stations. So a fire station was built in the early 70s, where the current El Toro Fire Station exists and where the current Gun Hill Fire Station exists. By the time those stations were completed, in the late 70s, the population of Morgan Hill was in the 20,000 range. Those are the fire services that have been provided since the 80s in Morgan Hill. We've gone through some changes. Chief Swing brought up, and there's a great nexus between public safety, fire, and police services. In the early 90s, the economics of the city changed dramatically, and it also changed for fire services too. And there had to be some changes in order to maintain service levels. A choice was made at that time by the city to contract out its fire service, sell its fire assets, the fire stations, the apparatus, to the Central Fire Protection District, which is Santa Clara County Fire today. And from 1995 until 2013, the Central Fire Protection District, Santa Clara County Fire, provided 2 fire stations in the city of Morgan Hill. It provided fire and rescue services to the city, including in the late 90s, early 2000s, the addition of advanced life support. Since the 70s, and a paper that came out that had to do with trauma and illness in the public, fire services have evolved from being a fire response model only to fire and rescue services, where you're providing emergency medical technicians and basic life support to advanced life support paramedicine. Because we know the sooner that we reach an individual who has an illness or an injury and start treatment, the better chances that they have of survival. So this community made that determination. The Santa Clara County's made that determination in the early 2000s that they wanted advanced life support resources for their fire departments. And so during that, right at the turn of the century, we basically made advanced life support services available to within South County. Did I get anything? Marie, is there anything else in that? Do you remember?
I think you're good.
Okay. Again, looking at regional fire protection models and looking at costs of scale, economies of scale in the early 2000, in the 2012 range, 2010 range, this city made a determination to work with the cities of Gilroy and with South Santa Clara County Fire District. A study was done to look at fire services and ways to be able to regionalize and have better economies of scale. And from the study that was done, the determination was made to change providers within the city of Morgan Hill. And so a request for a formal proposal went out to the community, went out to fire departments to be able to bid on what fire services would look like for the city of Morgan Hill. In 2012, a determination was made to change services from Central Fire, the Santa Clara County Fire Department, to reconstitute the city of Morgan Hill's fire department and to staff that and administrate that fire services through CAL FIRE. And so in January of 2013, services transitioned from Santa Clara County Fire to the Morgan Hill Fire Department, administered through a cooperative agreement with CAL FIRE. In 2014 or so, 2015, it was important. We'd had a few months and we'd had some time to basically have an established operational fire department that we were administering. And the cooperative relationship with the city meant there's now a department head that is a part of the city government. That department head, Chief Hess, is, and at the time it was Chief Waddell, basically is answering to the city manager. They're a part of this city's fire department. They're part of the entire city services. A study was done as part of the public safety master plan to include how are we doing, a look from outside by a third party at how are fire services being administered and operated within the city of Morgan Hill. How are things going? What needs improvement? What's working well? From that, there were many findings, many things that were going well, a few things that needed to be looked at, and we continue to address those. None of them were of detrimental significance, except one, and that was the city needs to look at doing a risk hazard assessment so that it has a better understanding what risks are out there in the community and what things we respond to, and basically a standards of cover study that needs to come with that. We're very fortunate that this meeting is extremely timely, as that standards of cover study was literally just finished and put out just this week. So you've had you had a homework assignment that came out, right, to be able to read the standards of cover study.
They may not have had an opportunity to read it yet.
Sure you have, right? It's only 2 or 3 pages.
Yeah, right.
That was literally a culmination of work over the last year by the fire and city services staff to be able to get that information to Citygate and then to be able to provide that document back to the city. We're looking forward to having that received and the report that comes from Citygate on December 4th at the City Council meeting. Just a quick, one of the great economies of scale for the city of Morgan Hill is the staff. We have the ability to work with the South Santa Clara County Fire District to share staffing positions. There's approximately 28 assigned staff members that work for the city of Morgan Hill, whether it's line personnel or administration, and I'll kind of line those out shortly. And we're broken into, there's a lot of interrelation between the functions, just like police services for fire services, but we basically have 4 functions within fire services. And we do also have public safety challenges and challenges similar to the police services. Our functions are broken into administration, field operations, the fire marshal's office. Chief Swing mentioned pro-policing and public contact outside of a response model, and I would say the fire marshal is about the closest thing that we have to that, kind of that leaning forward concept of working with businesses and working with the public to provide education and to reduce risk for the community from fire occurrence. And then support services that go along with keeping the fire operations running. For administration, there's about $500,000 is budgeted for administration. That includes internal costs to the city of Morgan Hill and the Morgan Hill employees that help to address things like finance and budgeting. And so there's always internal costs between departments, and that's one of them, and the CAL FIRE employees. There's 3 personnel. I put an asterisk there. Thank you, Morgan. One and a half of an assistant chief, that's my position. Half of an analyst position, and 1 full-time office technician. And the reason for the asterisk is Chief Hess serves as the fire chief for the city of Morgan Hill. But his position is actually not paid for by the city of Morgan Hill. His position is paid for by the state. There's an administrative cost that comes along with the actual costs for fire services in the city that's about 12%, right? Including all the benefits and everything else, like 12%, right? So his salary comes basically out of that. It's pooled funds within CAL FIRE that help to pay support positions within the State Department to support local government. The administration is responsible for budgeting, hiring, analysis, and we do all kinds of analysis and provide reports to the city. Special projects like the City Gate study, fire marshal invoicing, contract management. The fire marshal's office is half of a battalion chief and half of a full-time fire captain. It's about a $400,000 budget for those 2 positions. They're in charge of the business inspection program and coordination of that with the fire operations section that does a lot of the work. Mandatory public building inspections. There's about a half a dozen building types that are required by state law to be inspected annually and report out back to the state on the results of those findings, as well as we do a very significant business inspection program. There's over 2,000 business occupancies in the city of Morgan Hill that need to be inspected regularly, and so they're taking care of coordinating that program. The weed abatement program, brush abatement program, public outreach and public education coordinators, whether it be with schools, organizations, or any other special groups that are out there. There are certain Fire Prevention Week. Those kinds of programs are coordinated within the Fire Marshal's office, and information is distributed out through fire operations, the engagement coordinator, Marine, etc. And then grant coordination. You talked about the over $900,000 that's been realized as a savings for the city of Morgan Hill through grants. And those grant coordinations typically occur out of the Fire Marshal's office. Chief Dwight Good does a really good job for us, an excellent job of being able to secure grants, and he's constantly, aggressively out there looking for more funding through the grant program. Back to the weed and brush abatement. The weed abatement program is actually under contract with the County of Santa Clara that has a very robust weed abatement program. We're constantly balancing back and forth between what weed abatement program and brush abatement program is. But to just kind of summarize it, weed abatement is a complaint-based process that's then delivered to the county to do enforcement on. Brush abatement is a mandatory requirement to be able to go out by municipal code and inspect those areas in high fire hazard severity zones within the community to ensure that they have defensible space. So that's kind of the difference. One's an ordinance dealing with weeds and nuisance and complaint-based. The other one is an active, ongoing process to engage the public to make sure that their homes are defendable. Okay. And you can ask me questions as we're going to. It's fine. I'm telling you that. Fleet management, we have half of a mechanic position, half a full-time equivalent. The other half is with the South Santa Clara County Fire District for a mechanic. The actual fleet management program, because of the cooperative relationship with CAL FIRE, is actually 3 mechanics and a fleet equipment manager that run that entire program. We pay for a half of the position of those 4 people. But they're all available if there's a need. Dispatch services, a budget of $217,000 for 2 full-time positions for communications operators. The Morgan Hill Emergency Command Center, located here and off of Monterey, is actually staffed with 11, at least 3 people on during the day, with at least 2 at night, 24/7, 365, including a battalion chief, 5 captains, and communications operators. You know, our buy-in to that right now is 2 full-time people to be able to support that. South Santa Clara County Fire District supports that as well. And those resources processed over 40,000 calls in 2018, and we had 5,600 calls for service within the city of Morgan Hill, and closer to 9,000 calls in the South County area that were coordinated calls for service, either mutual aid, automatic aid, and we'll get into the boundary drop a little bit in a minute. Fire operations is a $5.6 million budget. 23 personnel are assigned to fire operations for the 3 fire stations, 2.5. About half of the staff are paramedics. Advanced life support services are provided through them. That's also through a first responder contract with the County of Santa Clara for EMS services to be able to provide ALS services. Those 2.5 engine companies, again, work 24-hour, basically 3 days on 24-hour shift. Just under 3,500 calls for service in 2018. In the last 7 years, we've seen a 35% increase in call volume since 2013. But the last few years have been closer to the 3 to 5% increase just in the last couple of years. We kind of had a little bit of a flattening out. But in the first few years, we saw very significant increases in call volume. And again, our staffing level is the same as it was basically in the 70s, late 70s. Service delivery and dealing with multi-company response models and efficiency of staffing. We'll get into that just a little bit. Other options for service delivery. So the multi-company response, and you'll have to bear with me because I have a bunch of notes in my thing here, and I want to make sure I cover it all. Hey, look at that. So multi-company response. There are nationally recognized standards through the National Fire Protection Association for an effective response force. Typically, single-family residence requires 12 firefighters and 2 supervisors to be able to manage to put that fire out, to keep that fire within the building of origin or within a, depending on your travel time, within the room of origin of a home. So 14 people. And as we've already kind of discussed, the cities surrounding 3 fire stations basically provide 9 and 1 chief officer within Morganville. So we have a deficiency in having an effective response force to respond to our calls. We basically do not have enough staff within the city of Morgan Hill and the nearby area, including the engine that's shared with South County, to be able to provide an effective response force for even a single-family resident structural fire. That has obviously been in existence for a long time. The efficiency of staffing, we have a model where our apparatus are staffed with 3 personnel. Those 3 personnel, making up the 9 personnel within the city, handle those 3,400 calls pretty much within the time limits that are required by our first responder contract. But as we'll see in a moment, industry standards are a little different compared to what the EMS first responder agreement is. Efficiencies of staffing, we utilize other cooperative personnel, and we also have a very robust, very active automatic aid boundary drop agreement with our local cooperators, the South Santa Clara County Fire District and the City of Gilroy. But any incident that requires a multi-company response requires mutual aid or automatic aid from our partners from San Jose or from outside of the area, typically, to be able to meet that need. So because we have this because we have those additional needs and those resources are farther away, it takes more time to get those resources into town to be able to control the incident that's occurring. So as long as we don't have an effective response force, it's hard to control an incident or to bring that incident to be in a stabilized condition. There are other options for delivery, and it kind of has to do, we can put additional resources in service that don't have to be 3 personnel, a squad model or some other resource other than a fire apparatus, and additional resources would be able to help with that efficiency of staffing, would help to provide an effective response force. EMS and ambulance service. We are in Santa Clara County, we're in a transition right now. We kind of talked about a little bit during police services about other options for providing alternative service models. The county has enjoyed an exclusive operating agreement with a private ambulance provider for over 20 years in Santa Clara County. And that while that provider has changed over time, an exclusive operating area and a private ambulance service provider is not tied directly to the city. They have a contractual arrangement with the county to provide ambulance services. Recently, an amendment to that agreement placed the private ambulance provider in a non-exclusive operating agreement with the county, which means there's an opportunity for others to come to the table and provide alternative service models to the county of Santa Clara for patient transport. The city managers and the county fire chiefs are very interested in studying this in greater detail. The study was done by the city of San Jose a number of years ago by Triton to look at what other models could potentially be provided within the county. And they're currently looking at that study to do a refresh of that, as well as to find out and gather what kind of consensus they can get from the cities as to what other models could be provided for transportation options, potentially a public service delivery model instead of a private model could be proposed in the county that would involve fire departments providing responsibility for transport in the future. Those recent changes are also allowed because it's a public safety model, and potentially there are doors that can open to do special delivery other than the current contractual arrangement of the ambulance delivers to the emergency department. We talked about community paramedicine programs. These are all things that can be proposed in the future before our expiration of our current agreement, which is in 2022. That EMS agreement expiring in 2022, there needs to be something in place before 2022 as to what the future of EMS transportation looks like in the county. And we're most heavily engaged in that. The city manager is working. We have one battalion chief that's involved in committees, as well as myself involved in committees to look at what the future of EMS transport looks like. The city council recently approved the acquisition of an ambulance and approval to spend funds to be able to bring that ambulance into service, and it kind of goes along with that non-exclusive operating agreement. As part of that agreement, the time penalties that are put on the private ambulance provider were relaxed pretty significantly. And while there used to be 5 zones within the county that the ambulance would have to meet response time criteria to, it's basically one general response zone for them to meet time criteria to now. South County doesn't see a lot of call volume in the overall picture of Santa Clara County. The ambulance provider could be late to every single call in South County and still make their time compliance. And that concerns us significantly. So having a resource available, there's already policy in place within the EMS, within emergency medical services to have a fire-based ambulance transport under certain conditions. And now because we will actually have that resource, we'll be able to do that. The other realization that we see from that is instead of a fire engine being tied up and committed at an incident for an extended period of time waiting for a transport resource, we can now transport the person that needs help, and we can place our fire apparatus back in service.
If you just go a little bit deeper in the rationale on why we reduce the response time based on having our own city rate here in place. I'm trying to understand why, based on the current contract, we reduce the service level response time based on having our own city rate. And just trying to understand the rationale.
Maybe I didn't explain it correctly. County EMS has an agreement with a private ambulance provider, and in there they have conditions for meeting certain response time criteria. It's independent of the city. We don't have any say in that at all. That is a relationship between the county emergency medical services and the private provider. So as far as the relaxation of that, had everything to do with the provider, the current provider stating that they cannot meet the response time criteria. So their proposal to the county, and they had basically no choice but to come with this, because there is no other provider we can take over with, we need to relax the response time criteria so that they could meet their obligation and continue to be solvent as a private ambulance provider. That's their realization.
Yeah, just to add it.
It's a mind bender to hear that, not.
Yeah,
I'm right there with you.
Conversation.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and again,
Right.
the city and the fire department are not involved in that negotiation. That's directly between the county and the private provider.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that's exactly, you know, those concerns were exactly what county raised, but county did put out an RFP ahead of time, but there were not enough, actually the current provider was the only one that submitted a bid, which was significantly high than what the current contract was. The county had an option to exercise an extension in their current agreement with the service provider. What ended up happening was when the county realized there is only one bid, and that's the current service provider, county said, well, we don't like your high amount on the new proposal. Under our current agreement, we have an option to exercise an extension. So we're hereby notifying you to do that. Well, AMR came back, knowing that there's nobody else submitting a bid, they wanted to open up the agreement and renegotiate. So those were some key, right? Yeah, so there were, you know, it was a very debated topic at the county level, but county EMS, knowing that, you know, they're liable to, they want to provide these services, so there were negotiations at the county level to go ahead and let's move forward, get this agreement signed, and then the committees being formed at the county level, myself and the city manager are sitting in on the committee as well. So all those conversations to really see what that really looks like down the road, to have a delivery model in place. That's where it all originated from, that we wanted to make sure that we're not cornered again, essentially.
Because we know there's more than one player out there as it relates to, so the question would be is why is only one respond to the RFP? I mean, that doesn't matter at all.
Right, yeah.
Well, every provider had an opportunity to submit a bid to the request, and only one chose to do so.
Well, it's all dependent on the requirements of the RFP. So some of those standards must have been.
And to that end, the submittal that was made by the current provider, it was not conforming to the bid either. So one of the reasons that all of them were thrown out is because the only one that submitted one was not conforming as well.
And just to add to the caveat is the county, just like county liable to provide those services to us, the county is also regulated by a state agency that sets the standards, what's required to be in the RFP. And that's part of the reason I think this whole conversation started. The contract was amended, significant times by the county and the current provider, that the state came in and said, actually, you know what, we're going to pull the non-exclusive bit of the agreement, because when the original RFP was put out, the current agreement has deviated significantly. Yeah.
Great question. And while it has nothing to do directly with fire services, 70% of the call volume that we see within the city of Morgan Hill is emergency medical.
Well, that's my concern.
So there's a huge high, even though transportation is not currently under the responsibility of the city as it sits today, we have a huge responsibility to the people, to the public, to be able to address that. And I think it really speaks to the level of engagement of the city by having the city manager and having the assistant city manager, your operations chief, your EMS battalion chief involved in the process. We want to make sure that this that we come out with something on the other end that's better than what we have today.
And just to add to that, Jim mentioned the recent council approval of a city ambulance. We didn't per se go out and buy one. Our partners, obviously CAL FIRE, were able to, through their relationships, actually find an ambulance that another agency down south had replaced, and which was fairly low miles and so forth. So council accepted a donation of that ambulance and approved the outfitting of that ambulance to be able to put into service here in our community. So again, just going back to, we talk about finding opportunities to creative ways to fund or acquire equipment and so forth through grants or other opportunities.
They did not approve, and we're very grateful that that's in place. I think that's going to help the fire department to be able to continue to provide the best level of service possible There were no additional personnel that came with that, so that resource is basically available unstaffed. If there is a need, we will activate that and respond to an incident. It may be cross-staffed at certain times. We can always overstaff with overtime as long as we stay within budget. And Harjo was always on me about that. So the ability to be able to staff that resource is there. However, at this time, we still do not have enough staffing to staff it 24/7. Any other questions about ambulance services and EMS? That evolution over the last 40 years has been significant, and I know Maureen can speak to it too. In an earlier career life, there's been a lot of changes in EMS, and some very positive changes. Really, right now is everything's kind of coming into alignment to make some significant positive changes for the public within the state of California. So, quality of life issues. I just point out, just like our police partners, we do have an aging community that is a focus of a number of incidents, enough to be able to point it out, as well as behavioral health and homeless issues. Those folks do tend to drop more services than people that are younger, that are people that have that do not have identified behavioral issues. So we do end up focusing quite a bit of attention in order to address those. We respond in cooperation with police services to anybody that's ill or injured, and that includes both the public that has behavioral health or homelessness issues as well. Police services to anybody that's ill or injured, and that includes both the public that has behavioral health or homelessness issues as well. So there is a nexus there. Back to the standards of coverage assessment. Just completed a year's worth of work by staff to be able to get that accomplished. The 3-department assessment study, Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and South Santa Clara County Fire District, all were involved in that process. We each are having growing pains. We're each kind of, as chief officers, identify and see that there are challenges. Having a third party to be able to come in and look at all 3 departments and report out was something that each one of the governing bodies felt was very important. There were 40 findings and 10 recommendations in total in the document. 31 of those findings relate to Morgan Hill and 7 recommendations relate to Morgan Hill. There's just not enough firefighters in the city to address a single serious incident, whether it be a structure fire, multi-casualty incident, or any other incident that requires a significant number of personnel. And EMS is a large bulk of our calls. We do respond typically single engine to those calls. However, we will always continue to have a responsibility to provide fire protection, to reduce risk or to reduce loss within the city for private property, whether it's commercial or residential. Interesting to note, I mentioned before, it takes 14 personnel to address a single-family residence. It's double that number to deal with a commercial resident or with a commercial fire. So it takes an effective response force of 28 personnel to be able to address a commercial fire that would occur. Morgan Hill is dependent on its neighbors and has a good relationship to be able to provide that with the South Santa Clara County Fire District, as well as with San Jose. We do not have a boundary drop with San Jose. We do have an automatic aid and mutual aid agreement with them, and they do provide service to the city as well.
So you work for CAL FIRE and you're considered the Morgan Hill Fire Department, right?
Correct.
Now who is the South Santa Clara County Fire District?
Great question. So the South Santa Clara County Fire District is a dependent district of the County of Santa Clara. So the board of directors for the fire district is the board of supervisors. They have an appointed commission of 7 members from the community that are responsible for the operation of the fire department. That fire department contracts with the South Santa Clara County Fire District, just like Morgan Hill, has a cooperative agreement with CAL FIRE to provide administrative and operational services. So the staff that are staffing South Santa Clara County Fire District equipment are CAL FIRE employees also. The relationship's almost exactly the same, just a different governing body. Yes, Doug?
You used the term boundary drop, and you compared that to either mutual aid or auto aid. Can you define the distinction for us?
Absolutely happy to do that. So governing bodies throughout the state of California are signatory to the mutual aid agreement. There's a statewide mutual aid agreement that we use to be able to provide resources across boundaries to other jurisdictions at times when they have an extended need for help. So rapidly escalating incidents, we see that all over California as part of mega fires or floods or debris flows that have occurred in California in the last few years. There's a lot of mutual aid resources that are going to help with those. It's a higher level body where departments are providing aid to their neighbor, basically neighbor helping neighbor at time of need. Automatic aid agreements are a more formal agreement party to party. So it could be, in this case, an adjoining jurisdiction where maybe you don't have a day-to-day relationship for need, but you need that resource at certain times. So they'll set up an automatic aid agreement. An automatic mutual aid agreement basically is a written agreement about how that operation will work to be able to share resources from one fire department or one governing agency or jurisdiction to another. And typically those entities are dispatched by different people. They have their own operation. They're doing their own thing on a day-to-day basis and share resources automatically when the request comes in if they're available. And then what a boundary drop is, it basically takes it to the next level. And that is, regardless of jurisdiction, regardless of where the call is at, regardless of what the service need is, the most appropriate, closest resource that's available will go. And Morgan Hill's a great example for that. As the fire protection district surrounds the city, you have one jurisdiction, you get to the city limits, and all of a sudden it's another jurisdiction, but the fire station at Dunn Hill is so much closer than the station that's on the south end of Morgan Hill that provides protection to the east side of the valley here. And so having a single dispatch center for both entities that are constantly monitoring the status of where those resources are at means you're getting the closest available resource that's appropriate for that call right away, instead of waiting for a delay to look for, is it okay if we can, it's where mutual aid, typically you have to go to a chief officer to ask for permission to send that resource. The dispatcher's making that choice in their computer-aided dispatch system to send the closest resource, and it's just an automatic policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Any other questions about that?
Well, I want to know about that. This just goes with a question. I'm having a hard time understanding. So you are, okay, so your badge says CAL FIRE, and is that directly associated with the station that's in the south part, Monterey, the south in the city? And then I just am trying to understand, the Morgan Hill, who they're responsible. I'm confused. It's just a little bit fuzzy to me, and then the whole South it's kind of like the St. Clair County Fire District. It's like kind of mush in my brain.
You're not alone.
Okay.
Okay. There's probably other people in the room asking that same question or thinking that in their head. So I'm glad you asked. So I work for CAL FIRE.
Is that
which is a state organization, the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection.
Got it.
About 8,000 employees that do, by a public resource code, are responsible to provide wildland fire protection in the state of California on private land. Not the U.S. Forest Service on federal land, but actual private land within the state. The California Department of Forestry, or CAL FIRE, has since the 20s had cooperative fire protection agreements with local government, county governments, county service areas, fire protection districts, and cities throughout California. Our biggest example that we have today is the County of Riverside's fire department is CAL FIRE. They are under cooperative agreement with CAL FIRE. The Board of Supervisors and the county pay CAL FIRE to administer and run their fire department, as well as a number of cities within the County of Riverside. We enjoy that same relationship here. Around the city of Morgan Hill and the state responsibility areas, we're providing wildland fire protection. There are 2 state engines and a bulldozer on the south end of town that provide wildland state mission fire protection throughout South County, and as well as the rest of the state. And then in addition to that, we've had an agreement in place since prior to 1980 to provide fire protection to the Morgan Hill rural Fire Protection District, which is no longer in existence, but it's a part of the South Santa Clara County Fire District. And so we have provided, since, for a very long time, provided cooperative services and administered a local program here around the city of Morgan Hill. So the county has paid CAL FIRE to provide personnel and administrative services to run their local fire department.
So is that why some things, it was like a 0.5 for full-time? Because some of the funding for our fire services, just within the boundaries of Morgan Hill, come from CAL FIRE, which is the state agency, and the county pays the state, and then some comes from the city of Morgan Hill to pay. Am I saying that correctly?
Sure.
Okay.
My salary is half refunded to the state by the city of Morgan Hill.
Okay.
Half of my salary is funded and paid to the state by the South Santa Clara County Fire
Now
District.
it's much shorter.
My job duties as the Assistant Chief of Cooperative Fire Services is to manage the Morgan Hill Fire Department and the South Santa Clara County Fire District. Those are local jurisdictional bodies that are seen by the council and by a commission to provide fire services locally. Local fire departments are responsible for life and property services, structured fire protection, fire and rescue, EMS. The state is responsible for wildland fire protection, basically the dirt in those areas, in unincorporated mountainous areas in California. But together, we can provide cooperative fire services regardless of jurisdiction.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Not the first time I've had to explain that.
I just need to acknowledge that we're at 11:30. Are people willing to stay longer to let Chief Crawford finish his presentation?
We have 3 more slides?
Yeah, not a lot. I have a sum everything up slide, a couple slides, but that can go quick.
So just back to this, not enough firefighters in the city to address a single serious incident. Morgan Hill is dependent and fortunately has a great relationship with the county fire district that surrounds the city to provide an effective response force and to achieve staffing of a single residential structure fire or other large incident. Other highlights, traffic congestion affects response times in the core of the city. All of our stations are kind of on that outer line areas, right? Dunn Hill, South Morgan Hill, El Toro. They all are kind of on the outside and travel in. Traffic congestion and the road matrix that's within Morgan Hill makes travel times to some areas more difficult. We need a third staff fire station today. We have projected it in the budget to occur by 2024, but truthfully, that service needs to be provided today. When you look at other statistics that are in the standards of cover study, you'll see there are 4 stations that are basically in a statistical dead heat in South County. 2 stations in Gilroy, the Morgan Hill station and the El Toro station, basically run about the same amount of call volume. But these 2 stations, 1 out of 5 calls occurs at those 2 stations. There's another call in their same area at the same time. So for every 5 calls they run, 1 of those calls is occurring simultaneously in their same first due. And that means a resource has to come from somewhere else to be able to manage that incident. It's a delay in response to be able to get to that call because of the travel time that has to occur. So that really tells us and identifies to us that there's an additional need. As part of the reorganization of redevelopment, a facility was identified right in downtown, basically, at Butterfield and Diana, next to the courthouse, that would be very central to the other 3 stations and provides collateral coverage to the outlying areas as well, which will help to shorten our response times. Average unit travel times are 2 to 3 minutes slower than generally accepted standards. The 8-minute standard that's provided as part of the first responder agreement with county EMS is 8 minutes. But really, when you look at survivability from a person who stops breathing or the heart stops, we really need to be there closer to 4 minutes. And so we are not making those times to meet the travel times that are typical standards for suburban areas. Cooperative service model that we have today is the best alternative going forward, and that cost effectiveness of being able to share resources and split fund personnel between separate jurisdictions really helps to identify ways that we have efficiencies within, and the fact that you're not paying for a fire chief, and neither is the South Santa Clara County Fire District. They're not paying for that chief position and the administrative staff.
Which doesn't mean we don't benefit a lot.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so we're benefiting from it without having that whole fully burdened cost of another chief.
Thank you. Chief has to, you're not paying for his position except as part of the administrative fee, but he's a department head. He is engaged in the city's operations and the city administration and has a voice at that table. It's not just a contractual relationship. It truly is an integrated workforce. And that's the difference between having a cooperative fire agreement and that's the great benefit of having a cooperative fire agreement. Growth. We'll continue to see growth, and as we continue to see growth, we'll continue to see increased calls of service. The very broad, nothing written down standard for a city is one fire station for every 10,000 people. There's no guideline, it's not written in a book anywhere, but that's kind of the standard that typically exists. Currently, we're at 45,000 people with 2.5 fire stations. Additional facilities are needed to be able to meet the demand. Additional challenges that are coming in. Oh, the next one? No. Additional challenges are coming through legislation. These areas that have been identified as fire hazard zones, high fire and very high fire hazard zones, are going to have mandatory inspection requirements. That's going to lead to additional workload within the fire marshal's office, and that doesn't even address what we already know is a significant issue, and that is this city, just like other cities throughout California, are just as susceptible to these mega fires that have been occurring and the risk that's there from wildland-urban interface fires. And if we had the money and the ability to be able to do it, we would upstaff additionally within the fire marshal's office to actively engage in additional inspection services to provide additional resiliency in the communities. But we're just talking about services that are needed for a response. It's hard for us to even get out in front and identify services that are needed to reduce risk when we're still having a struggle to meet the responses that we need. Home property inspections are a piece of that new legislation that basically says at the time that you're going to sell your home, that home within 120 days has to meet defensible space standards and would have to be inspected. We would love the opportunity to be able to engage with personnel to know that those inspections would go through very well because we're already out in the community doing resilience protection in advance. So the sale of your home would sail through because we already know that that's defendable because we've been out to those locations and provided that in advance. Because it's the right thing to do for the community is be resilient. Fire's general fund needs that are underfunded or unfunded are $2.3 million. The staffing of a third station will take 8 personnel. 9 would be premium for coverage and reduce basically any overtime needs to virtually 0. But 8 is kind of the spot that we figured we can manage. And so the 8 personnel basically would provide 3-person staffing 24/7 on whatever that new fire station or that new resource would be. Okay, thank you very much. And
Can I ask a quick
yes.
question, Jim? If you go back a slide, please, the 2.3 million, is that the City of Morgan Hill shared portion?
There will be no shared portion. It is strictly 8 full-time positions and funding for those 8 positions, dedicated funding from the City of Morgan Hill. It would be the next Morgan Hill fire engine or apparatus within the City of Morgan Hill. So, and just to that point, there's only one of the engines where we share staffing. Dunhill and El Toro are fully funded by the city, and everything is actual cost paid for those resources. Because of the call disparity of the engine that's located on the south end of town, 2/3 of the call on that fire district engine are run for the city, and 1/3 are run in the district. So as a way to be able to balance costs, we do a 50-50 share between the city and the district to staff that engine 7 days a week. So basically, half of the week is staffed with city-funded personnel, the other half of the week is funded with district-funded personnel. But they work obviously seamlessly together.
So this may not be a question that you want to answer now, or Maureen wants to take the time to answer now, but I'd like to get it on the record. I'm really curious what you're going to do going forward in terms of the number of people that respond to an incident, the kind of vehicle that's involved. You talked about EMS being transport, not first responder. You talked about congestion. 2011, the civil grand jury said, folks, in all the jurisdictions, you're rolling a big truck with 3 people for the majority of calls, which are medical. Gilroy currently has a 2-man pilot for a small truck. The SOC recommends perhaps Morgan Hill would have a centrally located 2-person team as well on a small truck or ambulance. In Europe, they actually dispatch EMS on motorcycles, which is one way to get around the congestion problem, because that's not going to get any better in the future. And then, of course, one of the problems you have is you don't know the situation you're going to, but before too long, video will be one of the ways that you get 911 calls. So a lot of pieces that I think affect what you're going to do going forward. Maybe you want to, compose some words and send it out to us, but I'm really curious if we're going to change the way we're responding, because everything you've said to me sounds like standard model, 3-person, big truck, and that's the staffing and that's the cost.
Thanks. Doug, I think you bring up some really good points. The current staffing that we have, I would not want to see a change to the staffing of those apparatus to an alternative service model. The city of Gilroy fully funds 3 stations right now, and their alternative service unit is either an ambulance, a fire-based ambulance, or a Type 6 engine. And we've identified that that may be the next resource, as certainly at the time while we're scaling up to having another station within the city. So that is one of the discussions that we're constantly having, is how can we provide the best efficiency for the staffing model. And so whether it be a squad, whether it be a patrol, or whether it be an ambulance, those are all potential opportunities to be able to provide EMS response, provide rescue response to calls, other than a Type 1 engine with 3 personnel minimum. So it's certainly a part of the conversation, and we will continue to have that as part of the conversation and move forward. The city is required the city, in order to maintain its insurance service offices standards, needs to have a certain amount of apparatus, fire apparatus available. An effective response force for firefighting through NFPA doesn't say they have to show up on a fire engine, but ISO says you need to have a certain amount of pumping capacity. What resources do you staff? You're graded based on that from a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the best. We're currently at a 3, which is not bad. That is very good. And so to add additional personnel and other alternative service models is certainly one of the things that we will identify. And as revenue becomes available to be able to staff, I don't think the next resource you will see will be a Type 1 engine. I think you will see some other model. A lot of it's kind of 50-50. Part of it has to do with what does EMS look like in 3 or 4 years. That's going to help us to determine what the next resource that we need to staff looks like.
Thank you.
You talked about the negotiations for the CMS. When will that actually be sold?
So the current contract's already been extended, and it runs through June 2022. Right, and so ideally you'd want to have, the county would want to have either a RFP done, or an alternative delivery model ready to go at least with a 1-year ramp-up time. Yeah, so ideally in 2021 is the ideal goal to figure that out and have something in place, so that way there's a 1-year transition period.
Okay, next question.
Can I just add to that? From the committee that I sit on, which is different than Marjola's.
Just rapid slides to go through with you. Chief Swing has to leave, but Captain Palsgrove is still here. I think Chief Crawford can stay around a little bit.
Actually, from here all day.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Also, please feel free to email the questions that you didn't get a chance to ask. I will make sure that the entire group sees them and we will provide answers. Next week is a short week because of the holiday, so it may not come out next week, but I promise it will. Just a reminder of what we've been doing here, because this is the end of our topics. Now it's time to really roll up your sleeves and get ready for a lot of activities. You know, we've talked about all these different things. Additionally, we talked about, with a very small group, pensions. I sent you the link to that informational flyer is also here. We also had, you know, the small group that took a deeper dive into the polling, which most of that was shared with the broader group as well. But we've covered a lot. You are very well educated members of the community now, and we're asking you to stay with us and put that all to work, right? The same slide again. We know for certain we have $7 million annually in unfunded needs, and additionally we're estimating at least another 1.1 million. That's not sustainable going into the future. We've got to figure out a solution. We've talked about that a lot through this whole thing. And we discussed that this is a multi-pronged solution. We didn't gather a group of residents together to say, okay, we really think a revenue measure is it. That's going to solve the problem. And we want you to help pass it. What we did is pull a group of residents together to say, we've got issues. We need creative ideas and solutions. And it's going to take all of us looking together at possibilities. And it's all of this. Yes, a revenue measure is a good possibility. Whether or not it's feasible to get a revenue measure passed in Morgan Hill still remains to be seen. We don't have a good history on that. This community is extremely tax averse. There's a lot of competing things that are going to be coming up. We've talked in detail about this, but yes, that probably is part of the solution. Economic development, and to Steve's question, he had to leave, our economic blueprint really guides us in the types of businesses that we are trying to attract to Morgan Hill for all the right reasons, and those do bring another type of revenue to the community. That's an important piece of it as well. When the community referends to hotels, you know, whether you believe that's right or wrong, it's important to understand there are consequences. There was revenue that we originally had projected to receive and now had to pull out, so that adds to these issues. When a car dealership, and this is just the way things happen sometimes, pulls out and decides they're not going to move forward, and this had nothing to do with the community being against it, but that's an impact. And car dealerships are our biggest source of tax revenue, right? Sales tax revenue. So those are big, that's a big deal for our community. You know, obviously reviewing our organizational effectiveness, it's something we do all the time, but we continue to do it, and we're going to continue to do it. Our service levels, that's a big piece of it. The idea of, Matthew brought it up last time, we didn't really discuss it today, but would a fire district make sense? Very similar to what we polled for with the CFD, Community Facilities District, but very specific to fire only. It was talked about before, many years ago, and we didn't move forward with it. But something like that is a possibility. This is something for this group to explore. So, lots of work ahead. You now are very knowledgeable. We hope you feel knowledgeable. Not that there are many more questions. Next time we meet on December 14th. I know the month of December is hectic and busy for people, But this was, the Saturday meeting was what most people said would work for them. I hope the majority of you can come. It will not be in this room. This room is booked for a revenue generating opportunity. The council chamber here is something we actually rent out, just like the facilities at the Community and Cultural Center and the multipurpose room at the CRC. And a couple of meeting rooms over there. So this is already in use. We can either meet in the smaller west room here, which is fine. West room, that doesn't sound right.
This conference room.
West conference room. Or the multipurpose room at the CRC is available. Is there any preference? Here in the smaller room?
Parking is available.
Yeah. Okay. Both are reserved right now in this moment, so I will make sure everybody knows that we will meet in not the west wing, the west conference room. This is really going to be an important meeting, so don't slough it off just because we don't have another topic. This is where we start having the hard conversations. We need to talk about, are there any questions? Are there gaps? Is there more information you feel like you need? How are all of you going to get involved in helping us communicate all of this out to your friends and neighbors? And what does that look like? And what are the hardcore commitments that you're willing to make? A few people have already made some commitments. We're working on simplifying all this information you've received. Yvonne has been a big help in that. And so this is an important meeting. We're also going to hopefully demo for you Balancing Act, which is an interactive budgeting tool, which we want to use with you and with the community.
Are we going to get an advanced look at the work that Jennifer and Yvonne are doing with this extracting?
Yes, absolutely. It's just not at a point to share yet, but I'm thinking probably in the next week or so it should be.
I can give this.
Yeah, I mean, we can send it out exactly the way it is now if you'd like to see it. Sometimes it's when you keep sending out versions and versions and versions, it gets challenging for people, but I'm happy to forward what's already been done. Yeah, so I'll send that out.
When it's reasonable, I mean.
Yeah, it's close to reasonable.
I would like to get stuff, throughout the period and not the night before the meeting.
I understand that, Doug, and I know that you, in your life, have time to go through a lot of details. A lot of people don't, and when we keep sending stuff that's not quite there, they stop looking.
Copy, especially for Doug.
Yeah, no, I will send it to the entire group. I'll send it to the entire group, then you all have it, and then those of you who do have the opportunity.
The reason I didn't get it to everybody is that someone made a very good suggestion, Jennifer Tate made a very good suggestion, and I haven't incorporated that into the document. And it was a question I thought a lot of people were going to ask, so that's why people didn't get it.
Yeah. The other thing is, when you get too many people commenting on a document, it can be difficult to ramp it in. This is my life, people. This is what I deal with every day. Internally, we have to have a lot of eyes on almost every communication. I do have some freedom in some things. Those are the ones that you find the errors and the ones that no one else has looked at. But yes, we will share it out. So, hope you can all come. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And truly, I personally am extremely grateful as a resident of this community for all that you are doing and the time that you're committing. I certainly, on a professional level, am so very grateful to all of you, but it's richer than that because I've lived here for over 30 years as well. And I just appreciate the care and concern and the time that you're all putting into this. Our entire City Council leadership team sincerely appreciate all that you're doing as well. So thank you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Jim and Shane are here. I'm being very informal now. If you have questions you'd like to ask them directly.